Let's get corrupted. What is going on, everybody? It's your boy Joe with Meteoric Serpents coming back at you for another episode of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. Guys, we have a good one in store for you tonight. We have on Joel of Prismatic Reptiles. Super excited for this one. He has a super, as the title says, a super diverse collection made up of a bunch of different species. So super excited to get talking to him and kind of seeing what's going on and showing all you guys. So yeah, but guys, as always, if you're tuning in, whether it's your first time or you've been here before, make sure you hit that subscribe button here on YouTube. We're trying to creep to that 1100 mark, which we're getting there. We're almost there. So keep hitting that subscribe button, especially if you're new. Make sure to leave a like on today's video. Drop a comment too if you're watching afterwards. Always helps to push the algorithm, so I appreciate it. And I always recommend watching the video version just to get a little bit better audio visual experience. But you could also listen to these shows on the major audio podcasting platforms like Apple, Spotify, a couple others as well. So if you're going to listen on there, please make sure you leave a 5-star review, follow the show so you know when the new episodes come out and all that good stuff. But yeah. And then, guys, you could follow all my social media. It's down here below. It's in the description as well. It's pretty much at Meteoric Serpents. Everywhere you can look me up. Even if you search Meteoric Serpents on Google, all my accounts are going to pop up. You can search Colubrid Corruption pretty much anywhere, and it's going to pop up there too. So give me a follow wherever it may be. Yeah, guys, make sure you're supporting USARK Florida. Those are the organizations that fight for our rights to keep our reptiles. They fight against, legislation that tries to get pushed through, having to do with restricting animals that we keep. So join the good fight and make sure that doesn't happen. I'm a member of both. The cheapest memberships of both are so inexpensive. And I always say, if you could afford to feed your animals, you could afford a USARK membership. So go ahead and do that. The first link in the description below will take you to the Meteoric Serpents Patreon. It's a way to get a little more behind the scenes access of what goes on here in my collection, what goes on with the show. If I ever do pre-recorded episodes, you get those early, pretty much as soon as those are done filming. And it's in the pin chat tonight if anyone's watching. If I get 2 new Patreon members before the end of this episode, I will reveal next week's super secret guest. And I kind of just want to reveal it already because I think it's a really cool one. And I haven't heard this person talk about colubrids, but tonight's not about that. But yeah, if you do decide to join, we'll reveal it. Otherwise, it helps to support the show and support what I'm doing over here. So, plus a group chat full of cool dudes who like colubrids. So, what can get better than that? And yeah, and before we get started tonight, I also see Keller's in the chat tonight. What's up, Keller? Hope you're doing well. We got our hashtag Colubrid Corruption of the Week. Guys, once again, as always, if you want to be featured on the show, once a week, I pick a random colubrid to get featured. You just got to put hashtag Colubrid Corruption on your colubrid photos here on Instagram. And we got a real nice Baird's rat snake from Anima Mundi Snakes. Jason. Yeah, Jason's been shouted out here a few times, but that's a super cool Baird's rat. They are super cool and variable species, so super nice. Go follow Jason over on Instagram here, Anima Mundi Snakes, with his cool Baird's rats. And yeah, let's see what. Why does it keep doing that? I'm not sure. All right, it keeps putting me full screen when I go solo. Also, and of course, before we get started, as always, Colubrid Fest, guys, September 12th to 14th at the Allen County War Memorial Coliseum in Fort Wayne, Indiana. 3-day event. The first day is the meet and greet. Second day are the reptile talks, or colubrid related talks, and the conservation auction. And then the Sunday is the Colubrid only reptile expo. Super cool, put on by Show Me Reptiles and the guys over at CCR. So it was a super fun event last year. I want to make sure it's a super fun event this year, so you should go check it out. The hotel block did just open this week. I'm not sure if that has been filled up already. I assume it's getting quite close. I did get myself a room, so I got that booked, and I'm very much looking forward to it. But yeah, that is about it for all that. So without further ado, let's bring our guest on for tonight and welcome Joel from Prismatic Reptiles. What's up, man? How are you?
How's it going? Good. I just brought all the snakes out of the brumation room today, so I've got colubrids on the mind.
Hell yeah, hell yeah. Nice, man. Yeah, and before we kind of get into all that, I want to know, and I'm sure the listeners do too, kind of want to hear your backstory, how you got into everything. I know you've been doing this for quite some time. So if you don't mind, can you kind of give the backstory and how that brought you to where you are today?
Yeah, of course. So as a kid, my parents were really into fishing and outdoor stuff. And so my brother and I were always catching garter snakes and lizards. And I remember we caught a horn lizard one time and it laid eggs. That was a pretty crazy thing. We had a desert horn lizard named Queenie. And
Nice.
luckily she was in the front window, so she did great and had some UVB. But he and I were just into Ninja Turtles and dinosaurs and all that type of stuff, and we were also outdoors all the time. So it was all about catching reptiles, catching fish, doing all that stuff. So we had a lot of pet snakes, kind of, here and there through our childhood. And we would go to the library and look up as much stuff about reptiles as we could. And, we tried to keep lizards. And the funny thing is we didn't know about UVB. And I need to look back at some of those books. I don't know they knew about UVB either, to be honest, in the early 90s, because
Okay.
we would just always have our lizards just crash after a few months.
What
Now I
kind of
know.
lizards are we talking?
Just like sagebrush lizards or like
Gotcha.
western fence lizards, just
Okay.
Scoloporus stuff. Yeah, if we'd found some Great Basin skinks, they would have done great. But yeah, so that was always frustrating for us. We're like, dude, the snakes do great. The lizards always kind of crash on us. And then, as an adult and as a reptile keeper, now I know why that was. But I hit adolescence, didn't really care about reptiles as much, just kind of your priorities change and all that type of stuff. Your focus definitely shifts. And so, yeah, I went to college. I didn't have, actually, that's not true. I did have some anoles when I lived in Tacoma.
Okay.
I kind of forgot about that. And so, I mean, just kind of casual interests here and there.
Right.
But then I got through college, didn't have any reptiles. And then I went on a trip to Las Vegas and we stopped for like just a pee break or whatever. And there was a 14-inch leopard lizard that we found and
Okay.
tried for like 2.5 hours to catch this thing. And it kept just going down holes. And I got a couple like good videos and stuff of it. But I had never seen a leopard lizard in person. I remember my dad did a whitewater, not rafting. I should never say rafting. He's a kayaker. He did a whitewater kayaking trip. He would kill me if I made that mistake, because that's rafters are not shit to kayakers. But they did this, I don't know, it was a week-long trip down the San Juan River around Four Corners. And so I remember very vividly as like a 10-year-old, him telling me about yellow-headed collared lizards and telling me how bright their heads were and how leopard lizards were so big and so ferocious and all this stuff. So the first time I saw that leopard lizard, it just like ignited something in me. And I remember I went on my trip in Vegas. I didn't go herping or anything there because I was doing family stuff. I wanted to. But when I got home, I looked on kingsnake.com. This was like 2011. And there was just fauna and king snake at the time.
Yep.
And dude, my mind was freaking blown at how far the hobby had come, because I used to have a Steve Osborne? So professional breeders up in Whitehall, Montana, or sorry, Whitefish, Montana. He's like one of the OG colubrid guys. He had some of the first Cal King, like albino Cal Kings.
Okay.
I still have the pamphlet because I used to just go crazy looking at it, but everything was so expensive. Ruth and I were like 2,500. He had like albino gray band crosses with Ruth and I. A couple other things. I remember the albino ball python was in there for 10 grand. And that was always kind of wild. But that was pretty much my exposure, was those price lists and like his little pamphlet. And so when I actually saw what had kind of become of the hobby, I was like, wow, I can get a gray band for like 250 versus 2,500 or whatever. And so
Right.
I was like, wow, this stuff is actually within reach now. And so yeah, I started buying lizards first because that was just kind of more what I was interested in, more what I was comfortable with. And so I got into collared lizards first. You've probably seen on my logo, that's a collared lizard in the little coloration pattern there. And I've thought about changing it, you know, because I just do snakes now, but really, I think it's part of the roots. So I'm leaving it there. Yeah. But I bred collared lizards. I had, I don't know, 6 or 7 different localities. I had horn lizards. I was just looking through my freezer the other day, and man, I kept more horn lizard species than I even remember, or than I had remembered. Mexican giant horn lizards were probably my favorite one. You know, they get like that big, and they're like 120 grams as adults. They're really big, really impressive. They also do well on less ants in their diet, which makes them really
All right.
a lot easier to keep. So I did have some success with other species. I never bred the Mexican giant horned lizard successfully, but I kept panther chameleons as well. I'm trying to think. I did have some leopard lizards. I never produced any of those. And then after a while, man, I just realized like all of the energy that you put into lizards with the UVB, with supplementation, with feeding them sometimes twice daily, and then you're selling these animals for the same as the price of a snake. It just doesn't make any sense. You know,
Right.
a collared lizard should be like $2,000 if you ask me, because of how much energy you've put into it. You know, you might get 7 eggs from you know, collared lizard, and they can double clutch. So, you know, you're looking at maybe 14 babies for the year, but man, the amount of time and energy you've put into bringing those to market is just insane. So it really just became an economic thing to be like, you know, with the return, I'm all about like my animals just paying their rent. I don't really care to make money. You know, I want to breed as many species as possible successfully and ethically, but I want them to pay their rent. And so if I go 2, 3, 4 years and they're not giving me any sort of return, then unless they're just a major passion project, I'm usually fine with moving on. And so that's what I did with the lizards. And I went to a reptile expo in 2012, I think, and there were some Pueblan milk snakes there. And I was like, I'm gonna just get one snake just to have, you know, because there was a time when I was in 4th grade when I was still really, really into snakes as a kid. Oddly enough, my janitor at my elementary school was like a big time reptile breeder. Like, I remember he was opening this huge, like, it was half zoo, half pet store in Idaho Falls where I grew up, and nothing ever came of it. I think he like lost the lease and whatever, but you know, I had seen a lot of advertising about it and stuff, and he would bring, you know, a whole clutch of cow kings or corn snakes or all this stuff to the school, and I would just go in the janitorial closet and check out all these snakes all the time. And one day he brought Pueblan milk snakes, and I was like, those are the coolest thing I've ever seen. Like, I got to figure out how to get some. And I think they were like $350 a piece. And so I made a deal with my parents to work as hard as I could to, you know, have them front me the money and then pay them off. And unfortunately, I don't believe they had ever eaten. I think they were pretty much right out of the egg. He told me that they were eating, but man, we tried. You know, my dad, bless his heart, he tried everything. We tried force feeding them. I mean, we did force feed them, and they ended up passing away, unfortunately. And so getting the Pueblan milk was just kind of something I had to do, given what had gone on with those first snakes. But
needed your redemption.
Exactly. And then stupidly, I got like 2.4, or I think I had 3.5 at some point. And then I sold them all before I ever bred them. And they were all adults.
Really?
I was like, dude, why? So now that's still something I got to get back. I think I'm going to get like a pair of hypo Pueblans or something. And I just have to check that box because it's just a wrong that I need to write. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. Yeah.
So,
yeah. So, Lamprepeltis is definitely a staple in your collection now. It's one of the big pieces.
Yeah.
Is that what you kind of started with when you were getting into snakes? It was all milks and king snakes?
Yes, for the most part. I got the Pueblan, and then I saw that there was a pair of carpets on not KSL, sorry, Craigslist in Boise. And then I was like, well, I'll look around and see what else is there. There was an adult female cow king and an adult female corn snake, anery corn snake. So I bought my second, third, fourth, and fifth snake all on the same day.
Nice.
And so that's like a 4-hour drive. I drove all the way to Boise, got those snakes, and came back. And then from there, yeah, it was all Greer Eye, Durango Mountain Kings, Gray Banded Kings. Gray Bands were probably the major thing that I started into. Excuse me, and Arizona Mountain Kings as well. And then, Mex. I've got Ruthven. I had California Mountain Kings as well. So, and then, yeah, all along, I was getting into more corn snake morphs and kind of diversifying there. Then I got into North American milks and then the Asian rat snakes and what was the snake you just featured? It was a metallic Baird's rat.
Oh,
sorry,
Baird's rat. Yeah,
totally blanked. Yeah, Baird's rats, subocularis, and then Mullendorf's, Barron's
nice.
Racers. I've had the Barron's
You
Racers.
still have Mullendorf's?
I don't. I sold my pair. I had a Barrett pair, and they produced super well for me every year. I think I got 6 or 7 eggs every year, and the hatchlings were just a pain, man. Like they would eat, like they didn't eat right off the bat. Like they were still tricky, but I was having problems with impaction. Like they would eat a pinky, and then it would like turn to stone in their belly, and then like a few inches before their cloaca, you could see that it would get all backed up. And then, yeah, sometimes they would pass away from that. So it was frustrating where I was like, man, I start out with 7 healthy babies and I might have 3, that make it. And so I tried talking to Matthew Most and who else? Somebody else. Is it Larry Keller? He's a big rat snake guy. Is it Larry Keller? Jason Keller's name in the chat threw me off. Yeah, it was Larry Keller. So, okay. I tried reaching out to some people and nobody knew what I was talking about. They're like, I don't understand what that's about. And I'm like, so I changed substrate, I tried to keep them more moist, I tried all sorts of stuff, but yeah, I did that for about 4 years and they, like I say, they produce great. They have the smelliest musk of any snake on the planet. They're
really,
bro, it stinks up the whole room. It is just, and it's like orange and thick. And yeah, they hate human beings. Let me just tell you, they really don't like our kind. I saw a guy on a field herping video recently catch one in a cave, and I think it was
Rupert's Reptiles. Yeah, yeah. I watched that video. That was super cool.
And it was super chill. I'm like, what the hell? You literally ripped it out of its dark cave and it's fine with you, but mine literally want me to die.
And it was a full-grown adult too. It wasn't like it was a baby either. It was super chill.
Lot. Yeah, it was a lot bigger than my adults were. I was kind of shocked. I was like, that is a big ass Mullendorf. Holy. So yeah, I mean, but like I say, my female was mature, but I think probably just a different locality or something, because that thing he pulled out of there was a chonker. That was nuts.
Yeah.
I love his videos.
No. Yeah, for sure. Cool, man. All right, so I kind of want to jump right in and kind of go over your whole collection when it comes to like the Montane, king snakes, and Mexicana. Overview of what you got working in that whole department. I know I'm not as much, very much proclaimed, so I know I don't know as much when it comes to Lamprepeltis, but dude, the more I've seen and like with the guests I've had on here, I mean, there's so many cool king snakes out there, and they're just, and you got some great stock too. So I kind of just want to jump right into it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if you want to pick kind of a species to start off with, yeah, go for it.
I should probably pick Pyros because that's like my biggest thing, but I'm going to go Leonis. I'm going to pull a switcheroo and go with Leonis. That's what I've been kind of posting most lately. So I've been, every time I post something, I have to delve through all their lineage and stuff like that. And now that I've done that, like it kind of reinvigorates you. Like, dude, that's crazy. I'm able to trace it back that far. Like you kind of just forget, when you have this many animals. So yeah, that's That's a weird one. I don't know where the striping is coming from. I posted that and I was kind of like, I'm not sure if anybody else has seen one quite like this. And yeah, it's definitely interesting. There's a guy in Germany, Rainer Doran, who's working like a patternless line. And I think I've
Interesting.
seen a little bit of that, like chaining, where the pattern is divided, so the dorsum is clear or patternless, and then you have a couple of the saddles or the remnants of the saddles, and I believe I've seen some of his kind of chained along, but definitely not with like a full jag like this. It's pretty
Yeah.
wild.
No, yeah, and they're super cool, and having guests on. If John Lasseter's in the chat, maybe he could comment on it. But like when I had him on, and just seeing the kinds of snakes he has, I mean, Leonis are just insane, and they're so cool with how variable they are.
Yeah,
But yeah,
and John says it well. Like Leonis are the only species that make you miss work because they're hatching. Because everything else, you're like, I kind of know what to expect, but with Leonis, you're like, dude, I have got to see the next head. Like you switched males, so now it's like a different phenotype for everything. Like, yeah, it's just
yeah,
they're so fun. Oh yeah, that's a nice one. So that last one was like a blue phenotype. Um, and that all comes from the Alaska Reptiles line from Maria Heidkamp.
okay,
She's no longer around, but Tyler Kennedy and I got a couple animals from the last clutch that I believe she ever sold, which was in 2014. He got a pair and I got two females. So he's got one up on me because his are like pure all Alaska reptiles, but I was able to outcross mine with other blood and it worked out. I still got the keyhole blood type or phenotype
nice.
with it. So that's what a lot of that stuff is. Um, the pin band stuff came out of my Alaska reptiles, which was Vivid and Jonel Lopez together. There's not a lot of locality information with Leonis, but we do, like Vivid Reptiles is in West Texas. They've gotten a lot of animals that were confiscated, excuse me, things like that. So they've got a little bit of that
Right.
real knowledge of what the locality is. But other than that, you just go with Jonel Lopez. Like he's very well respected. Nobody's going to question, oh, was he making, Ruth Van Eye crosses or something like that? Like that's kind of just how it goes. You just have to trust the person you buy from. And
Yeah.
I heard John talking about how nobody calls anything Lassiter line, but I think there's definitely an argument for for him to have some lines out there, but it also I think it's partially because he sold his collection around I think he said 2008 and he got back in, so that's one thing with the longevity. You've got to kind of just stick around, or else if you have to get back in, then you're kind of just putting back together what you kind of lost. So yeah, so there I have a line that I call Prismatic line. That's the orange jag that started with
Cool.
Joe Forks. Do you know who Joe Forks is?
I'm not familiar.
Okay, so he's best known, I guess, for the Forks Sonoran gophers. So there's the Forks morph and then the Super Forks, which is like an almost patternless one. But I'm trying to remember. Chris starts with an A. He got an animal from this guy named Chris who was really into very pure locality specific stuff with Leonis, and he hatched out this really weird one that was yellow and orange, and she had a little bit of aberrancy, but she was not a jag by any means. So I bought that animal from him, and then I outcrossed it to some aberrant animals from Vivid Reptiles, and so that's
Nice.
I'm 3 generations into that now, so I'm calling it my line.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of fun.
Yeah.
The only gripe I have is that they hatch smaller than my other Leonis. So that's one thing I'm going to try to address is maybe, mixing in blood of a little larger adult.
Right.
If I can get the eggs a little big, because the eggs are small too. And then a lot of times the babies are small, which is a pain. But, when you compare them to like a North American milk that's like this big, it's whatever, because I'm talking animals that are like 7 or 8 inches versus 3.5 or 4. So yeah, it's not that bad.
Yeah. And with the Leonis, I mean, there's just, it's like dipping your hand in a bag of, candy. You just never know what you're going to get. But
Yes.
with these different lines you're working with, are you getting these consistent results, or do you have even outliers within those clutches that are just like, this is not even that at all? Like, I can't
Yes.
represent it as that.
Yeah, the keyhole line has been for me, the most interesting in that regard because, like I just told you, I had 2 original females, and so I had to outcross immediately. So, whatever was happening with that phenotype, I already kind of interrupted it first generation. But I've kept the animals back that were, more in that realm, the keyhole realm. And keyhole is referring, just so everybody knows what I'm talking about, the saddle. So going this way across the top of the snake kind of goes like this and looks like a key would go into it. So
Got
that's
it.
what the keyhole line kind of comes from. And now that I've outcrossed it, and I think this is second generation now, I'm getting a lot of results that are kind of showing, like I was getting them, they were very consistent at first because I was still breeding those original females only. And so mostly everything I got was a keyhole pattern. But now that I've held back some of their daughters and bred them back to their sons, I'm getting a lot different results. And I'm getting a lot of like intermediates, which are kind of in between like a milk snake phase with big wide bands and like a smaller saddle. So they call them intermediate because they're just kind of in between. I've
Right.
hatched a few of those. Um, yeah, so it's kind of funny. Like I just posted a bunch of keyhole line stuff, and I'm calling it keyhole line and not green keyhole or whatever because some of them aren't keyholes at all. They're totally a different pattern. But I'm still very very happy with how they're looking. I mean, they're every single one. I haven't had one that was a dog yet where I'm like, that's just kind of a normal variable king. Like let's not call it anything. Um, so yeah, they're really really interesting, and the color shift is the other thing I'm trying to kind of figure out because when they hatch, I label them as a green keyhole or a blue keyhole or whatever I see at the time, and that's in August or whatever of the prior year. And I keep most of my stuff until the following spring just because I don't like dealing with it ate twice and then wouldn't eat for the person, and then it's a big problem. And I like
Right.
everything to be really well established. And as much as as much of a pain as it is to keep the snakes for that long, it's honestly less of a pain than going back and forth with people being like, this is something else you can try. This is something else. Here's a gecko. Let me mail you a freaking whatever, like it can get unruly. So I've made that mistake before and I've learned from it. But anyway, what I'm saying is it's been 8 or 9 months and that snake has gotten 3 times the size, and sometimes I go to post it, I'm like, this is not a green keyhole, this thing is bright yellow, or it's I labeled it green and now it's going blue or bone white. And so it's interesting because we always think of the ontogenetic change kind of happening around like sub-adulthood, like
Yep.
a year and a half, 2 years, something like that. But Leonis seem to have a couple of those throughout their life, and part of it is definitely hormonal because my 2 original females from Alaska Reptiles, one's blue, one's green, and looking at their baby pictures, it's the same thing as I'm talking about. You would never have been able to call what direction they were going to go.
Got
Um,
it.
I didn't buy the blue female knowing she was going to go blue, but she's definitely my favorite freaking Leonis because she's blue. I mean, she's absolutely gorgeous. Um, but yeah, that's just kind of part of it, I guess. Throughout the hormonal cycle of the year, those 2 females will go from like a earth tone type. Like sometimes I have to look twice. I'm like, what the? Like I look at the snake and I'm like, that's not the right. And then I'm like, oh, I guess it's just because it's spring or or whatever. They had their second meal, so now they're looking like earth tone. And then in the fall, a lot of times after they've laid their eggs, then they get like really really vibrant, and it's so strange to see snakes that don't really you wouldn't think there's a lot of like chromatophores going on there because it's not like a bright blue. It's not like a blue Barons racer. It's just kind of like a slate gunmetal gray type thing. But there's something going on there that they really, it's like with ball pythons, the glow before they go type of thing. They can really, you're like, when did this become a DG? And it's kind of like that. So it's interesting. So I just try to tell people in the ads, like, this is kind of a yellowish, greenish. Either way, it's going to be cool. You know what I mean? Like that's the good thing, is that they all turn out nice. I've never had anybody disappointed that their snake went the wrong color shift, but that's kind of part of the fun, that they do color change a lot more than some others. But that's pretty, except for, I'm trying to think. Yeah, in the Mexicana complex, I'm trying to think of snakes that don't do that. I mean, Ruthven don't, because they're banded. I think anything that's banded doesn't really as much. But like, I don't know if you've seen some gray banded king snakes that start out super light phase, and then they're dark black and orange as adults, and that just is part of the fun.
So I know you said you'll keep stuff like a good 8 months, but have you ever kept something that didn't turn out as good as you wanted it to, or the reverse? You had like seller's remorse because you sold an animal that turned out to be a screamer with them.
Absolutely, yes, both. Oh man, I don't even want to think about the seller's remorse thing. I try to just put that. I'm like, there's nothing I can do. I try to just forget about it as soon as I see it. But yeah, there are a few people I can name right now that have stuff that I never should have left my hands. And yeah, definitely there are ones where I'm like, I had one last year, and I'm going to sound crazy because I've been going so back and forth with this snake. So Maria hatched out this white aberrant keyhole, and she called it the snow leopard. And that was like, I'll have to send you a picture of it. It was really spectacular. And I knew that was kind of a chance that something like that could occur in this bloodline. So I've kind of always just hoped for a leopard of some sort. And I made one last year, and I called it the blue leopard. And then about, I think she's going to be 2. Yeah. So about a year in, I'm like, this snake is getting all this like stippling on it, like all these little black dots on the scales. She's going like this kind of muddy gray. Like, I was like, I'm glad I didn't post anything about this, because it's not a blue snake at all. And because I was just tooting my own horn the whole time, like, I can't believe I made this. I'm so stoked. But I wanted to see how it was going to turn out. And then I got real bummed about it because it was not going the way I wanted it. And now the stippling has gotten like so extreme that it's like this speckled, like really cool looking animal. It's still not blue, but the speckling has like grown and grown to the point that I'm like, I love this snake again. Like, it's not what I expected. It's not what I wanted it to be, but it's every bit as cool. And so, yeah, I've definitely had them go both ways, and that's how it goes. You make 350 of them, you're going to just have to let some go and hope that you make the right choices with holdbacks. But
is that how many you're producing a year?
Right around there. Yeah. This year with corn snakes and hognose and everything, I think I was right around 500 colubrids. And about 350 of those are usually Mexicana and Montane kings.
Nice.
So that equates to March of the following year, I still have 36 snakes that aren't eating on their own. So, yeah,
damn,
yeah, it's annoying, but they're finally starting. I mean, that number was like 50 something a month ago. So, luckily, they're sensing that there's something going on outside. They should start eating for.
I was gonna say, have you had animals not eat at all, and then you do the brumation trick? Just put them through, and then they come out wanting to eat.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot more of that in the last 2 years. So last year I bought a little wine cooler, and I don't know what happened or what the deal was, but I was opening the door every day, so it wasn't lack of oxygen. My dad suggested maybe it could be like an ozone buildup or something like that, but I had deli cups stacked up, and I would have like 3 of them in the same level die. Like, just out of, I mean, they weren't skinny, you know, it wasn't anything like that. Oh, my cat's gonna try to jump up here. Don't do it, buddy. Yeah, just totally inexplicable. So it happened once, and then I was like, okay, I'm gonna start opening the door twice a day, just checking everything way more carefully. And then it happened. I want to say it was 2 snakes in the same level. Like, it wasn't the same level as the last time, but they were still next to each other, which is really odd. So yeah, I stopped using that thing, obviously, and I'm like, I was looking for like O2 sensors, and they make these like industrial sensors where you can detect like CO2 and oxygen and all this. They're like $700. I was like, I'm not buying that. I'm just gonna get another wine cooler. So I did. I got a really super good deal on a really nice wine cooler, and a big one, so I can put like adults in it and stuff. And I'm super stoked about that, because that's, well, I'll continue and then I'll make my point. But yep, here he is. Come on, buddy.
There we go.
So yeah, this year I had the ability to do it without snakes being in harm's way, evidently, and I wasn't as impressed as I thought I was going to be, given the results. Like, I think I put maybe 50 in there, and now I want to say like 35 of them are eating, or 40 or something. But I think the proportions would have kind of been the same if I would have kept them up all winter and tried to just continue doing tricks, like scenting and stuff. I will say that I didn't get it up and running. I didn't even get it until like the middle of November or something. So maybe getting them in sooner would have been more helpful. But yeah, and that's part of the thing, is when it's getting late, you don't have a lot of time to leave them in there. You can leave them in like maybe a month, but you can't really mess around much longer than that, because then they'll lose enough weight that they're not going to come back. So this year I'm hoping to have better results, because I can put them down in like September or something, when they have all the body weight in the world, and maybe I can leave them down for like 3 months and bring them back up. And so I can't really say anything definitive, because I haven't had a good season of being able to do it the way that I want to do it. But yeah, I think it's hard. I definitely am a believer that they don't eat in the first fall the majority of the time when they're born. But I don't know. It seems weird that that's the time that lizards are small, like, it's obviously warm enough. So that's the thing that I struggle with, is people say, well, they don't eat until the first spring anyway. Well, if you know anything about lizards, they're fucking that big by spring. So like, what are they eating? So that's my argument to that, is they have to be eating something in the fall, because lizards are adults or subadults by spring, and when I go out and catch lizards for scenting and stuff like that, I notice that like in a 2-week span, they've gone from like 1 inch to 2.5. And because they're just out there just wrecking bugs like crazy. And so, yeah, I'm trying to remember my other point about brumation spurring eating. I lost it for the moment, but I'll hopefully come back to it. But yeah, I do think it's something to have in your arsenal. I think it's a lot harder. If nothing else, if you have a lot of animals, it's good to just split things up into groups, so you can focus on one group at a time, get them going. Because if you just are doing it all at once, and like at the beginning of the season, I had 100 non-feeders, and that's really difficult to keep up with. So if nothing else, you're putting them away, and you're just buying yourself time with that group to get the one you're focused on now going, and then you can address those. You know what I mean? So I think that's my biggest advantage, I guess, is it just gives me time.
Cool.
So
yeah. And for those who maybe want to know or want to keep the species, what's your kind of before we get into others, like, what's your general husbandry guidelines for Leonis and the rest of the Mexicana complex?
Yeah, I keep all of them the same temperatures generally. My room is about 73, and in recent years, I've kind of lowered the heat tape. I normally had it set to like 85, maybe up to like 87. I have back heat, so the top of the rack is 5 degrees warmer than the bottom of the
Yeah.
rack. So I did this. I made this change, I don't know, 5 years ago or so, where I only put males on like the bottom 3 levels, and then all the upper 7, because they're 10 level racks, are all
Yeah.
females, so they get warmer. That's definitely so. Rod McLeod from Highland Herps was one of my big mentors coming up, and he's like a real science guy, and so he uses a microscope and looks at sperm motility and stuff like that. And so he really ingrained in me that keeping males too warm is not good.
Right.
They'll still breed, but if you're looking at the sperm under a microscope and it's not moving, then it's doing you no good. So he's really good about that. Like, he'll check the sperm, and if it's not doing what it should be doing, he'll switch males or keep them cooler the next year, or whatever. He'll make those kind of accommodations. But right now, I think last year I was trying to stick more towards 84 in the back. They don't really use the heat unless they're digesting or starting to build follicles and ovulate. Especially my pyros, they're pretty much always up in the front. It's almost like, I mean, they're not like pasted to the front like they're like panicking to escape it or something, but they're decidedly in the front of the tub where it's 73 or 4.
Right.
So yeah, I think depending on your setup, you could definitely tweak things, that make them species specific. The Leonis use the heat more than the Pyros do, which makes sense to me, being that they're more southerly, and I do think that they're generally not as high elevation. If I'm not mistaken, I know Leonis do get up there, but you can find them in kind of grassland areas and stuff. So I think they enjoy the heat a little bit more. Trying to think. Yeah, like I said, I keep back heat. With the California Mountain Kings, I noticed that a humid hide was absolutely necessary. They need it more humid than all the other kings. Pyros, for whatever reason, they're like a stone's throw away, and they're very similar, but they don't necessarily need one. They'll use it, and when I put lay boxes in, then I take the eggs out, and then I leave the nest box, just leave it as a humid hide. I've already done the work to put the sphagnum moss in there, so I may as well just moisten it and let them use it. And they definitely enjoy it. But I mean, if I had a smaller number of animals, I'd probably focus more on giving them all that, because it's kind of like John Lasseter was talking about with the Applegate enclosures, where you can have kind of dark and cool, or moist and warm, or moist and cool. You can have all of the different options for them to pick. And I definitely think there's huge advantages to that, obviously, where the snake can pick from a whole myriad of options. But man, they're super, super simple. I hardly ever have like a stuck shed issue. Like, they're on Sandy chips, which is, kiln dried aspen, and they, it's pretty arid. Like, I think my relative humidity is like 35%. So I'm in the high desert here. It's not humid at all. And it's always a perfect shed, unless, there's a one-off or whatever. They go for a mouse and get like a crusty snout or something like that. And, they might not get the head cap or whatever, but other than that, yeah, they do just fine that way.
Awesome. Cool. Yeah, I want to talk about the pyros a little bit, because I haven't really highlighted pyros on the show. And in reality, I don't know a lot about them, besides the fact we had one or two at the pet store job I worked at. I didn't really do a whole lot with it, so it's just not really into my memory. But they're definitely cool snakes. But if you want to go over what you kind of have working with those guys, go for it.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm glad you went that direction, because, like I say, pyros are probably my main thing. I can't imagine that there's anybody in the world who has more pyros than I do. You don't go around asking people like, how many adults do you have? But I'm pretty sure Rod would be the only other person I think who might have a comparable number. I have a whole wall, which there's I think 100 there. I have like 130 adult pyros or something like that.
Oh wow.
I have a ton. I was just telling my worker kid who helps me out today. I was like, dude, I gotta narrow down a little bit because I'm literally doing every single project that I can even conceive of in pyros because I'm just obsessed with them. So the main well, you think should probably give a nod to locality first. There are a bunch of really cool localities, and I used to work with a lot of those. Prescott, Arizona. It's spelled Prescott, but they call it Prescott. I don't know what that's about. Same with Hurricane, Utah. They call it Hurricane. So when you're down there, you just gotta roll with the punches. It's very strange, but
All right.
Prescott pyros are from the Bradshaw Mountains. They're one of the more commonly kept locales, and it's pretty much, there's like Cave Creek and stuff like that, but most of it is kind of specific to whatever Sky Island like mountain chain they come from. So you'd have like Chiricahuas or you'd have Huachucas, and some of them are more specific than that, like down to a hillside or a road or something like that. But mostly people will kind of consider like a Chiricahua to be locale specific, even if it's not that. The Chiricahuas are huge, or like Madera Canyon is a Santa Rita locale, if that makes sense. So you can get super specific, or they can be pretty broad. They do look a lot different. There's a lot of like argument right now in the taxonomy because Arizona, right, had Utah Mountain Kings up here, which are infralabialis because they have a different like a labial scale,
Okay.
which I think they've gotten rid of that too. But in northern Arizona, about a quarter of the way down, there's the Mogollon Rim, and they're saying that what's his name? Anyway, the guy who wrote the paper said that anything south of that is now Lamprepeltis nablocki, which nablocki look completely different from pyros. They have the like really fancy chained sides and the very like intricate side patterning that pyros just don't have because they're fully banded.
Right.
And so that has thrown a whole wrench in everything because, Terra Humera that's what they call nablocki, Terra Humera Mountain Kings. Terra Humera is way down there, way past the border. It's deep in Mexico. Not deep, but it's in Mexico, decidedly way down there. And so what he did was say that everything all the way up to the Mogollon Rim is now nablocki. And so that made everything that I have nablocki technically, because I don't have any Utah pyros. I don't have anything real far north Arizona.
Okay.
Most of us in herpetoculture deny that, and we won't accept what that guy's saying. Tanner is his name. But anyway, it's interesting, I guess, nonetheless, because now we're talking about potential hybrid stuff, and it's very frustrating because I don't fuck with hybrids at all. So like, it makes me mad being like, dude, like it's kind of what happened with emery rat snakes and corn snakes, right? At one time they were the same species, but now everything that has emorii is a hybrid. So it's very similar to that. But anyway, so the localities were really something I was into for a long time, but then I got more into the morphs, and I've always been into the morphs, but I have this one wall of pyros, and I'm trying my best just to keep everything in the pyro wall and not have them bleed into everything else, because I've really reduced my corn snake collection like massively. I got rid of probably 90% of my adult corn snakes.
Okay.
And that allowed a lot of my holdback pyros to take those spaces. So now it's just kind of morphing into like more and more and more pyros. But that kind of, as I was trying to keep everything in the pyro wall, I was like, yeah, this locality can go, that locality can go. The only locale that I still have are the New Mexico locality. And I'm trying to think. I don't like to say the very specific. It's Black Range. I have the very specific place where they came from, but I don't want to share that because obviously people can just go pull up and look for snakes and grab them. But they're really, really cool. They have a fully red head cap. They're born quite a bit smaller, and they're just a different animal. It's kind of like how Utah Mountain Kings are quite a bit different from Arizona Mountain Kings. I don't know if you can really put your finger on how to describe it, but when you interact with them, they're just kind of a little different. So I do still have the New Mexicos, but other than that, I'm doing the morphs, which are Applegate, which makes them red and white. The one that you just pulled up was a Bobel, which is a line bred trait. And Chris Bobel's been refining that for 29 years, I think, from the Santa Rita locale. So actually, I do have Santa Rita locale because I have Bobels. And Bobel and Applegate look very similar, where you're getting like the white and the red and very little black, and it's kind of that 50-50 candy cane thing. Bobel's not recessive, like I say, it's just a line bred trait. But we have Applegate, we have albino, which works like you'd think. We have 2 lines of hypo, which you could argue that Applegate is a line of hypo as well. But I don't want to get into it. And the 2 lines of hypo are BHB and Sense. And Sense is spelled Sentz. It's the last name of the guy who, I guess, found the originals, or I don't know, he was working with them. BHB obviously is from BHB, from Brian Barczyk.
Right.
His story was pretty interesting about how he got his morphs. And I'm not sure I would do it justice to tell it, but it was something along the lines of like, the first albinos came from like 1 pyro from a pet store in like Indiana and 1 pyro from a pet store in Kansas or something. And he bred them together and got albinos. And I don't know what the hypo story was, but so we have the hypo, albino, Applegate, and then we have hypo erythristic, which in the thumbnail that you did, that was the pyro that you chose to put on that. That's the so I think, yeah, that's everything, right? Albino, hypo, Applegate, and hypo-E. Pretty much, there's a couple other things, but it's pretty much just four mutations, if I'm not mistaken. So what you're looking at there on the right-hand side is a normal Applegate, which, it's like I say, it's that candy cane kind of 50-50 white and red thing. And then on the left, it's a hypo Applegate. So
got it.
They're, I've never been one for making like hybinos or hypo Applegates or anything like that, because if a mutation works on the black band, then why am I going to do another mutation that works on the black band? That has just never made sense to me. But in saying that, when Matthew Woodhall got out of the hobby, so Matthew Woodhall was the other guy who probably had 3rd or 4th most pyros in the world, other than Jeff Teal. I got to shout out Jeff Teal. He's one of the real OGs of pyro mutations and just keeping the hobby alive. When Matthew Woodhall got out, he had a lot of double heads for certain things like hypo and Applegate or hibino and stuff like that. So I had never pursued that stuff. I never tried to make double heads or triple heads or anything, but I bought a lot of that stuff because I was like, who other than me should have it? You know what I mean? Like, I'm the only person who cares, so I might as well take it. And so I made those BHB hypo Applegates, and I was really shocked at how much the hypo affected the red. And some people were telling me, well, you can't know for sure unless you breed them. And that's why I posted that picture. I'm like, bro, like, you can tell the difference between those two things. Like,
the one on the left, to put it into words for the people listening, we're talking about, a banded, white and red snake versus like even brighter white and orange bands. Like, it just turned it orange, and like a light orange. It's not super like deep. So yeah, it brightened it a ton for sure.
Yeah, you're right. Good call. I forget some people are going to be just listening and not watching.
Yeah.
Like, what are they talking about?
Yeah. I don't do a good job of doing that, but Clint does it over on CCR, so I figure I have to do it sometimes.
Yeah, that's smart. I made my first hybinos last year, and same thing. I posted pictures of them, and people said the same thing. You're going to have to breed them to find out. I'm like, dog, I'm looking at them in person. Like, I don't know what you're seeing in the photos, but these are hybinos. Like, I've made 100 albinos or more. Like, I made 50 or more hypos. Like, I know the difference. And so, yeah, I kept a pair. They're super pretty. I don't know if I did a side-by-side with a hibino, with like a normal albino or anything, but I'll have to do that. But So that's kind of where we're at right now. We're doing the multi-recessive thing. I was, well, maybe I won't get into that, but well, so Rod, like I said, was one of my mentors. He got lucky and got the first the first hypo E, which is basically the form of anery that we have. It's just not as, you can't say it's lacking all erythrin, which is red pigment. But it's very, very reduced. And so that's what's cool. Hypo E to me is like the next level gene, because all of the other recessive mutations in pyros affect the black band. So now we finally have something that affects the red band. And so that's where all the cool stuff comes in. Now we can make snows. Now we can make ghosts. Now we can make, what's the other one? Hypo E Applegates. And so that's what Rod got from Jeff Teal, was the first Hypo E Applegate. And so he's way, way ahead of me on that project. He's made multiple double visuals, but they look freaking amazing. This is a new one right here. And I think it's, well, let me think. Before, I don't want to speak out of my side of my neck. I think it has to be polygenic. So I guess, yeah, I shouldn't leave out zebra. Zebras are another mutation that we've got going on. And then this one, which is, I've only made the original. So my adults that made these babies you're showing are the first, and the clutch mates were the first ones. And then, so these are kind of the second generation. So I bred the adults back to each other to see if I could make the same look. And I messaged my buddy Brett Siebert, who bought one of those from the clutch that my adults are from. And he sent me a picture of it. And I was like, dude. And that was one of those moments where I'm like, I should not have sold that. Like, I knew it was special. And now seeing it as an adult, I'm like, bro, yours are nicer than mine. Like, that's freaking sick. So he has them too. Cool. But yeah, like, this thing is crazy. The two things that it really does are a wicked head stamp. Like, that's not a normal pyro head stamp. They do this like ink blot thing, which is really cool. And then especially as they grow, you'll see it more when they age, but this one has pretty good examples where the red band has this like white or like lighter flaming in the band.
Definitely.
And that gets way more exaggerated as they grow, which makes sense. So I'm calling it Cherry Blossom for right now. I don't know if the name will stick or anything like that. I've got people interested in them. I think I posted 1.3 of them, and I honestly should keep all of them, but I have the adults that are both visuals. And like I say, I'm trying to not do absolutely every project times infinity. So I just decided this year I'll let them go. I know I can produce more. If I was smart though, I'd keep at least 1.2, but yeah, I think they're probably going to go to my buddy who's in the Netherlands. There's a couple people in, I guess it's the Netherlands specifically. I wanted to say Iceland, but there are a couple European countries that have banned cow kings. So they're really particularly interested in king snakes that they're able to work with. And so pyros are kind of gaining some popularity there, which is neat. But yeah, so like I was saying, the Hypo E Applegate is really cool. I don't have one, otherwise I'd show you. I have posted pictures of rods like on my ads when I've made like double heads and stuff like that, just give them photo credit. They're pretty extreme because you can imagine it's white, red, and then you wash out the red to be this like, I don't know what, like some of them are orangey, but most of them are like a peach color to like a, I don't know, like a dull red. I don't know how you really describe, like the one on the thumbnail. What would you describe that red band to be?
Let's pull this up.
It's almost like lavender, right?
Yeah, it's like a grayish, purpley kind of color.
Yeah, it's the best you can do.
That's a cool snake. That's why I chose that one. Absolutely. I'll tell you that it's a cool snake.
Yeah, I like those a lot. And so then the next one, talk about snakes that you can't describe the color. My girlfriend always makes fun of me because I'm saying that snakes are like blue or like this or that, and she's like, that's not blue, but to snake people it is, right? It's like
blue enough, right?
Yeah, I feel the blue coming out. Like, it's funny because she's not like a bona fide snake person. So when she hears us talking at expos, being like, "Oh yeah, you see the lavender hues and the little the mauve coming out," she's just shaking her head like, "You guys are idiots. It's gray." Like, shut up. It's pretty funny. But the one that I can't really describe is the hypo. The Sense hypo especially is really, I mean, I've always said Sense hypos are nicer than BHB hypos, but I never really had a lot of BHB hypos. They're definitely different, but that black band gets washed out to that silvery purpley thing that like happens with T positive Nelsoni. And it's like almost like those Sharpies that are like the silver color. That's kind of how I equate it, but it's got like lavendery tones to it. Really cool. So that was the main project I wanted to work, was the Hypo E with the Hypo Melanistic. And so I made the first Ghost, we call it, back in 2021, I think. And I'm working with double hets. So, you know, I make 3 eggs. You know, it's hard to do. I made it the first year though. That was freaking sick. Out of, you know, 1 in 16 odds, I made it on the first shot, which was sweet. Of course, it was a female. It would have been better to have a male to go back to all the double hets. But yeah, so I have her now. I kept her up at a brumation this year because she was just kind of on that cusp of big enough to breed. So I was like, either she'll be real small for this year, or I can keep her up and she'll be like perfectly good and, you know, very robust for 2026. So I didn't brumate her, and unless I see her ovulate, I don't think I'll even throw a male in there. And even if I do, with pyros, I don't really think there's a good chance of them laying good eggs after not having a brumation. Right. I would say that the chances are a lot higher if the male brumated, which mine did. But yeah, I guess that's something to throw out there about breeding this type of stuff, is if you don't have a nice cool brumation, then it's anybody's guess as to whether you're going to get good eggs, because especially pyros, you know, all the really higher mountain stuff gets really cold. So this year I got some of my pyros down to like 39, and they were totally fine. So yeah. So anyway, yeah, that's the other one, is the Sense Hypo E, which is called a Sense Ghost. And then the third one that's been made is the Snow, which is Hypo E and albino together. And that one is really spectacular also. The only person who's made it is Kyle Greenhalgh. I think it's got a GH at the end. Okay. I'm butchering that. Prestige Corns out of the UK. So cool. He hit one last year and he hit one this year. And I had a female that was ready to breed in like 2016 or something. That was a double het, and she just up and died out of nowhere. So I would have, so I've had this male double het just sitting here for years. And when he made his, and now he's kept back, like, you know, visual possible hets for the other, I bought 2 adult female double hets from him. So I have a good shot, or I have a shot at making one this year. So that's very pretty cool. Fun. And then the third one would be, or not third, I guess it would be the fourth. There was a pair of triple hets that I bought from Matthew Woodhall that are het, BHB hypo, amelanistic or albino, and Applegate. And I hit for sure one, which I haven't announced this yet because this stupid thing won't eat. But I made the first triple visual Arizona Mountain King Snake last year. And awesome. I'm just working on getting that one to eat. There's a potential that I hit 2, but it's unclear. But I definitely hit 1. So, and she ate a morning gecko last week, so things are looking. Okay. Yeah, I'm very thankful for that. And that's exactly, and that's the thing with stuff like this, you know. Well, I don't know if Kyle wants me to say this or not, but he made the world's first snow. And then I was asking him about it like a year later. He's like, "Oh, bro, that thing died. Like, it just didn't do good out of the egg." And so that was kind of where I took the page out of his book to be like, maybe I'm not even going to post it till it's like robust and doing good. Cause, you know, that's kind of a bummer to have people ask you about a snake and then you're like, "Yeah, it's not around anymore." Yeah. I hope I can hit it again.
It sucks, man. And you know, death is something that I feel like we as breeders don't talk about a whole lot. And shit just happens in these collections sometimes, man. And it's crazy because like you go from, you know, just being like your average keeper and you have a few snakes, right? And very high probability that they'll all do well forever. But then once you really start expanding the collection and you get more and more animals, then suddenly one goes here, one goes there, and I'm just like, shit. And like, yeah, I think I talked about it last week. Like, I had some just unfortunate mishaps last year, and I had animals go on me, and it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
But like, you know, it just happens.
Yeah, it does. And that's honestly something I wish people would talk about more,
Yeah.
because it's important when it comes to people like, you know, I've got people who invest money in projects and they think, well, if I get a 1.2, I'm good or whatever, you know, like
You are
go
not
like
good.
it's old school herper wisdom to get a 2.3 at least, because if that male dies, you're cooked. You know, if you
Yep.
have something take out all three females, like say you've got somebody helping you and they don't water it and you didn't check, there goes all three of those, you know. So
Yep.
stuff happens. And this year I lost 3 really important snakes in brumation, and I'm sure it's my fault because I got stuff too cold, because I was getting stuff cold for Mexicon and Montane stuff down on the floor. You know, it was like 39, maybe 36, not 36, 37. I think would have been the very, very coldest. Everything down there did fine. I have stuff
Okay.
stacked all the way to the ceiling, and when you temp that stuff, it's like 50, right? Even if it's 37 down on the ground. So I had Transpecos rat snakes that were way, way up at the top, and I did that on purpose, you know, because I know they don't need to get that cold. And West Texas
Right.
sometimes is 85 degrees in freaking January, so I didn't want to get them that cold, and so I stacked them up high. So I had 3 by the window, which is where my AC unit comes in and where everything gets the coldest. Those all lived and did completely fine. The ones in the way back by my closet, which is closer to the warmest part of the house, which were probably 3 to 5 degrees warmer, those 2 died. And I'm like, I don't even understand. Like, it is the weirdest thing. And
Yeah.
same thing, I have a pair, well, I did have a pair of hypo Baird's rats, and I've been trying to breed those for the last couple of years. The female was just dead in her tub, closer again to the cold part than the male, and he's completely fine, and she passed away. So I fucked around and found out. Basically, I was trying to get cold, you know, and colder than
Yeah.
normal, and I got too close to the sun with that one. So it's
Right.
it's very unfortunate, but yeah, like you say, stuff happens, and you just, yeah, I think it's important for people to be kind of more prepared for that than a lot of people paint it out to be, where, you know, oh, you hit this, or it's like, okay, good, but you got to get it feeding, and you got to make sure
Yeah.
everything, and it's not only just getting them feeding. I haven't heard a lot of people talk about this either, is a lot of times you try and try and try, and then they finally eat, and it's like it doesn't sit right, and they just die. Like, you finally get them going, and then you see
Yep.
the way the meal is sitting, and you're like, uh-oh, that's too much. Like, their metabolism isn't ready for it, or what, you know, you just see the way the meal looks in their belly, and you're like, they're either going to regurge or they're just going to pass away. And that does
Yeah.
happen, you know, a lot more than people like to admit, I think. So yeah, that's, like I say, that's why that's a big advantage to put stuff in brumation, so you can kind of split things up, you know, because if you're making that many babies, you know, good luck. If you don't have anything else going on, maybe you could try to tail them every 3 days or whatever. But dude, that's an insane
Hell.
amount of work. Yeah, it's just unmanageable, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's important. And it's just, people need to realize that just because you hatch something and doesn't mean that you can just try to feed it once a week and you're doing everything you should be doing to get it going. You know, sometimes it
Right.
takes 3 and 4 interventions in the same week to keep that animal going, whether it's a tail or you're force feeding it a pinky head or whatever it is you're doing. You're having to do something with it, or you're
Right.
scenting, you know, offering it live, that type of thing. So I think that's something that people, especially beginners, don't understand, because they get a pair of gray bands that's already eating. They're like, okay, even if I have a couple that don't eat, it's like, dude, they're all not going to eat. You're going to get 10 eggs, you're going to have 10 non-feeders, and then your experience of having 2 babies that you raised to adulthood. Good job, but somebody already did that hard work for you. And so I think it's eye-opening when people have that first season. They're like, dang, this is a lot more work than I kind of expected it to be. And then sometimes it's not. Sometimes you have those clutches that are just, 4 years in a row they've just been a pain in the butt, and then suddenly they all eat one year and they're all totally freaking bulletproof, and you're like, thank goodness, this is a gift from God. So
kind of going off on that tangent, obviously with the Mexicana and just a lot of Lamprepeltis in general, like stepping in is almost necessary to like make sure these animals actually survive. But what about species that do quite well out of the egg? How quick are you to intervene? And now granted, you have a large collection, so I'm sure having to step in and assist animals do this and that is quite time consuming for you. Let's say, even for like ball pythons, and some of your other easygoing species out of the egg, like how quick are you going to step in? Because for me, what I can say is that granted, I haven't produced a lot of animals myself, so maybe I'm speaking out of turn, but I have not, like, I don't know if I'll ever like force feed a Texas rat to make it survive. Like, if that thing doesn't want to eat, like, I'm not sure I really, it is what it is in my opinion. And I know some other people think the same way, but what is your kind of thought process on that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Before I go into that, I should say there are certain locales and bloodlines and lineages of the Mexicana and Montane kings that are pretty damn bulletproof. That's one reason. I mean, I love the keyhole line Leonis anyway. It wouldn't have mattered if they were terrible feeders, but they have been absolutely stellar. And I think this year I had one clutch from one of the like outcrosses that I had to do some stuff with, but other than that, I've never had to intervene with any of them, and they've all just taken mice like no problem. And they're usually like 3 times the size of a lot of my other Leonis at this point because of that. Like I produced Ruthveni for the first time this season. None of them needed any intervention. So I don't want to scare people off and make it sound like, all 10 of your Alterna aren't going to eat, because I have clutches of, 5 to 7 Alterna, and they all do eat sometimes. Just with nothing. So I do want to say that much, but in general, yeah, you better be prepared. You know what I mean? Like, you just better have the skills just in case. But yeah, I've had corn snakes that have been harder than Alterna. Like, if a corn snake, like a Pantherophis of whatever variety, does not want to eat, it doesn't matter what you do. Like, I've tried anoles, I've tried iguana lynx, I can't even remember all the things I've tried. And then they're a pretty like diminutive hatchling, like especially corn snakes. They're very fragile and small. And so if they don't eat, you've got very limited time to make something happen, or they're just going to start to go downhill. So, yeah, it definitely, it sounds bad, but the importance of the animal does weigh in. Like, if it's the first triple recessive pyro or whatever, yeah, I'm going to definitely give that one extra attention versus an anery corn that's, just doesn't want to play ball. So it sounds bad, but I mean, can you really blame somebody? I don't think you can, because I can make an anery corn snake 300 times this year, but it could take me a decade to make another triple recessive pyro. So it's not necessarily about dollar value. I don't want people to think that. It's about how special the animal is and how much you really need it to stick around for you. But, and it's the same thing with ball pythons. 66% possible triple het male something versus like a hypopuzzle female or whatever. You're probably gonna be like, okay, it's time that female eat, and the male can have a couple more rounds of doing whatever he's gonna do. But yeah, there's definitely species. I'm trying to think. Actually, this year I had a Barons racer for the first time not just take right off. I have a female green Barons that I'm still force feeding, which is crazy. But luckily, because of their body makeup, like she's really able to handle force fed entire pinkies. And so she's
Gotcha.
doing great, and she's still super strong. And she did eat a morning gecko last week, which was a good sign. But that was a weird one because Barron's racers are usually known for just taking right off. Shoot, and I have tried live. I know people are gonna be like, "Well, did you try live?" Yeah, I've tried live every single week for I don't know 17 weeks or something like that, and she just will not do it. I've force fed her live pinkies, and that still didn't get her going. So yeah, and I produced something around 200 ball pythons this year. So I think I had 3 that needed assist feeding and stuff. And one of them, man, was a real pain in the butt because I gave her a mouse and the mouse just went right after her. Like I don't know what it was. The mouse was starved or something. I get my rodents delivered, so I don't necessarily know how long it's been since they had access to food. Like
Right.
they always have like carrots and like little veggies and stuff in there, but I don't think that's going to really satiate their appetite. So this mouse just I dropped it in, I shut the thing, and it was the female's first meal, the ball python's first meal, or it should have been. And then I literally checked like 3 or 4 others. It'd been maybe 15 minutes, and I check in there, and this mouse is just gnawing on the freaking snake's dorsum, and I'm like, bro, like
Oh,
what the? Like I've never seen something happen that fast with a
yeah.
rodent. Like it was bizarre. So then, of course, that snake was intimidated for a very long time.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, I tried to assist feed her. Well, I tried a couple more hoppers, and I just obviously supervised to make sure that she doesn't have some weird tasty thing about her that they just want to eat all the time. But, I tried live fuzzies. I did that several times, and then she just would not eat. And she was like visibly scared, like hiding her head and just like not having it. And it took me, I think, 3 times of assist feeding to actually get her to take it down, which normally assist feeding a ball python isn't that hard. Like you might have to try like twice or something. They might spit it out once, but they can't usually manage to spit it out more than that. And I had 3 separate times where I thought I had gotten it. She started halfway, and I shut the tub, nice and quietly and gently, and then I go in there and the things just spit out again. So it took me, yeah, like 2 months to get that one going, and now I don't think I ever did get her to take a full assist feed. I think she spit them all out, and then she decided to eat on the next one. So it happens, but yeah, that's a weird thing. I'm trying to think of other species. I mean, Mollendorfs have been one for sure that I've had to work a lot with on force feeding for a while, and then they'll take a live and then go from there. Rhino rats are kind of a pain because you have to feed them fish,
Right.
and if you don't have like a fish tank or something, then you're talking about multiple trips to the pet store every week. Because I was just telling my buddy, I'm mentoring this kid who's getting into Mexicon and Montane stuff, but he also just bought his first adult pair of rhino rats. And I was
Okay.
just telling him like how fish calories and rodent calories are not the same. Like a rhino rat will eat like a good size fish and have a good bolus, and the next day it's gone, and then hours later it's pooped out. And so it's interesting that that it just doesn't stick in their system the same. Then when they finally take a rodent, you see that bolus takes 2 or 3 days. It
Yeah.
obviously lasts the whole week, but the fish don't at all. So it's just constant going to the pet store, going to the pet store.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that's just getting them started with the rhinos. Like once they
Yeah,
get do adjust to like pinkies, as far as I keep hearing, they're pretty much bulletproof from
they are.
there. Um,
They are. Except
yeah.
my males won't eat for crap during the spring.
Oh
Like
shoot.
it's pretty common, for a lot of species when there's pheromones going on and stuff. But
Yep.
I swear, my male rhino rats will eat 2 mice maybe till like July. Like
I
it's
keep
insane.
hearing this about rhino males. It seems
Yeah,
rather common that these
yeah,
males like routinely go off feed, especially
yep,
when they're in breeding mode.
yeah. So I try to anticipate that and give them 3 or 4 in pretty quick succession. And it's not like they're worse for wear or anything. I just feel bad. Like it's a long
Yeah.
time to go without food. And a lot of times it's live that I have to entice them with, which is weird because, rhino rats are usually just ready to take anything, your finger or otherwise. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
All mine are little savages, so that's always a good thing.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
They're a really fun species and a really interesting species, I think.
Oh yeah, for sure. I do want to circle back to the Barons racers because those are just like I feel like one of the most up and coming colubrids right now. Everyone's a little obsessed with Barons racers and what's going on there. And I know from your Instagram that you produce some blues and greens. So what do you got going on with your Barons project and how many animals you working with and yeah, what's going on with all that?
Yeah, so I have a green female that produces blue babies, well, half and half. So she does, when I breed her to the blue male, the clutch is half blue, half green. And they're actually kind of hard to tell the difference at first when they first hatch out. I was just messaging a girl who had her first clutch, and she was thinking maybe she had some brown ones mixed in, which would be interesting. I've not heard of that, where you could get brown, blue, and green all together. But yeah, you're looking at exactly what I was going to say is the green ones, where they're not all that green, they're going to have a bright yellow throat. And the blue ones, although that's like a turquoise color now, when they first hatch, it's white. So that's the best way to tell them apart, even before their first shed. Because I had been breeding my blues together, and so I only made blues for a time. And then when I had greens thrown in, I was like, this is kind of throwing me off. And it gets way obvious after they've had like 3 or 4 meals. But at first, they're just kind of ubiquitous, grayish, tealy, kind of whatever, a little green mixed in type snakes.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I've got the big green female, I've got a big blue female, and I've got a blue male. I had, let me think. Well, right now, I mean, I think I would be lying if I said that blue isn't where it's at. Blues are way more expensive. They're just shockingly cool. I mean, there's not a lot of blue snakes in the world. Like there's Insularis and them, and a couple others maybe, but yeah, they're definitely in the highest demand. Although that being said, I think brown ones are really cool. And they
Yes,
used to
they
be,
are.
yeah,
I think the Browns are underrated.
I agree. I told my friend that, and then he sent me a link to a Morph Market ad of someone selling brown ones. I think they were like $7.50 a piece, and I was like, oh, I like them. I don't know if I like them that much. Like, because last time I saw blue or brown ones, they were like 125 or something like that. So I was like, I like them, but not at that price point. But
right.
And there are a lot of in-betweeners too. Like there are like powdery, like almost, they're not really blue. They're like a sky blue. You see like teal, turquoisey ones.
Yeah.
And they're true blue. But then you see like sky blue ones that are like real light, and there's a whole host of different green ones. Like my green female, I want to say she's 40% black. Like she's got a ton of black that's grown on her, and she's a 2014, so she's almost 10 years old. And a lot of that's just come with age. But and I've seen people talking about melanistic ones, where they've got like flecking and stuff that kind of comes in as they age. But are you aware of the like fully black ones?
I've been told about them. I haven't actually seen a picture of them, I don't think.
Okay. I'll send you a picture because there's a guy named Juan Perez. He lives in Argentina, which obviously is where they're native to. Yep. And yeah, he had definitely 2. And they're, I mean, jet black. They do have a lighter throat. So that's not black. But everything else about them is jet black. And unfortunately, I was talking to him about trying to get them to the States, and we were talking about legality, and I don't think it was really possible. But I then reached out this spring to be like, hey, how are they doing? Because he had tried to breed a black one to a blue one, and he didn't get any good eggs. And he was like, oh yeah, I don't have them anymore. I sold them to a Spaniard, and he told me they died. And I was like,
oh shoot.
I was like, that's terrible. So hopefully you know how it is with like super rare stuff. Cause I mean, I can't even imagine the price of a black Barons racer, probably 20 grand, you know?
Yeah.
So, and you know how it goes in the reptile industry. They may have died, but we're going to see them later type of thing, you know? So that's what I'm hoping is that he maybe, he like owed him some money and told him they died so he didn't have to pay it or something like that. Cause you see shady shit like that all the time. So
Yeah.
hopefully they died, not really died, and we'll still see them at some point. But yeah, they're freaking incredible. We have no idea what they do as far as with other morphs, or I don't really care, honestly. I would just want black ones. They're so cool looking. And then, you know, there's like gray ones too. If you look on Facebook on the Baron Eye fan club group, that's where Juan Perez has posted a lot of those.
Oh, okay.
And yeah, this is super cool, man. Like he's even posted some pictures with like a black one, a gray one, a brown one, and a blue one in the same tub. Like it's snake porn for sure. Like it's really pleasing to look at. You're like, wow, that is just.
I don't think I'm quite familiar with the gray tone either, unless it's kind of like a derivative of one of the others. It's its own separate thing.
I think so. And I want to say there might have been one girl who was in the United States that posted one that was truly gray. But the other ones I think were all in like Spain or Portugal or like Italy. But yeah, there's another phase too, and that one is really, really pleasing as well. I think it's incredible looking. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I think there's a long future with Barons racers.
Oh yeah,
you know, everybody's interest is already peaked. They're a little bit tricky to breed. I mean, they're tricky to incubate, I would say, because they freaking incubate for like 3 months. I think my eggs went like 89 days or something.
Okay.
I remember the first time I produced them, I put like a piece of painter's tape on the cage to just remind myself these take for goddamn ever. So don't forget next year, because the first year I produced them, I was just getting so stressed. I was like, dude, this is like a long time. Like I at that point it was, you know, 2016, 2015, something like that. And I couldn't find any information about how long they incubated. So I was just panicking. And then I was like, you better make a note of this, because otherwise you're going to just freak out every time you're incubating these things. And I have had a good number of eggs go bad over time. Like just, you know, when they're sitting there for 3 months, it's easy for them to get too moist or too dry. And, you know, I say the longer the incubation, the more likelihood of stuff going wrong. So, which I think will keep demand high and supply low, because I think everybody thinks they're the next big Barons breeder, but
yeah,
I don't know if that's really in the cards for everybody. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
Yeah. It's interesting to see what they're doing, because I did see on one of your posts that you're selling, or you have been selling a lot of them overseas. I know there are some other breeders that are doing the same. And I do know that blues are being picked up, but they're expensive. You know, you're not going to get your average person that's going to scoop up a blue Barons. That's for sure.
Right. Exactly.
You know, I've been seeing like between like 1,750 to 2,500 in that kind of range on them. So, you know, it's you got to dig deep if you really want one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do. And I mean, maybe that'll help, I guess, in a way, to get people who are responsible and do want to, you know, continue the propagation of them. But a lot of people that I've sold to domestically, well, I don't know if I should say a lot, but there have been decidedly a few that have just been like, I just want one as a pet. Like, it's just like the pinnacle animal. Like, it's kind of like indigos, you know, like you just want one and it's like the crown jewel of your collection. Don't care to breed it. So I think there's definitely some of that going on as well. But yeah, China and Hong Kong right now are scooping up as many blue Barons as possible. That's where they're all going. We'll see what happens. You know, I think given that it's not like, you know, Brazil or something where you can't get anything cold, will probably help them to be able to propagate them. And we might see them selling them back to us in a few years with, I mean, literally the numbers of blue barons going over there are, I would say, 90% of what's being produced. I mean, in my estimation.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to fall behind because they're scooping them all up. But if somebody's going to give you 1,000 for one here or 2,000 for one there, who are you going to sell to?
Right.
That's just how that goes. But
yeah,
they're really fun, man. I sold a few to Cole Grover. He's a big milk snake guy. I know. Oh gosh, David Deem from Temporalis Enterprises. He gave Cole a couple shout outs, which was awesome. But I sold Cole some green ones. I don't know, 5 years ago, something like that. And it's been fun to watch, man. He's he keeps little milk snakes, like little North American milks. Like that's just what he's known for. And so it's just been really kind of funny watching his reaction to like, damn, these barons are really like cool. Like they're different. And yeah, I think he bought like 4 or 5. He's got a few, and he's just always telling me how he's just so enamored with them. And I don't think he cares whether they produce or not. They're just really fun to have around. And they don't really like, people are scared of them because they're really racy. They're real fast and darty and flighty and stuff, but they don't really bite. Like at least mine. So I've got the 3 adults, I've got a female subadult, and then I've got a yearling pair. And I can't remember the last time I was bitten by one. So I maybe other people's are different, but and I think the setup definitely could probably have something to do with that. Like if you have them in like a big enclosure or something like that, where they're in a position where they're like, okay, I see you coming and I can definitely mitigate the threat, then that's probably a little different from opening a tub where they're just like, what's going on? So I think that probably has something to do with it. But I was actually going to set mine up. I have these 3x2x2s behind me. And I was going to put my blue pair in there today because I took them out of brumation, like I mentioned, and the freaking radiant heat panel isn't working. So I had to pull that sucker out, and I'm gonna buy a new one, and I'm gonna keep them in there this year and see how bad I regret cohabbing them when I'm trying to feed. I think it's going to be kind of a pain.
Yeah, it might be. With those guys.
Yeah. The good thing is pretty much all summer long, the male moves back between the green and the blue's cage. So a lot of the time he won't even be in there when I'm trying to feed. And then I can kind of use that, I can feed the blue girl first and then, pull him out, feed him, and then the green. And so hopefully it'll work out somehow. Maybe I'll just have a spare tub for him to feed in or something, but they're just too cool not to display.
Yeah,
honestly,
definitely. No, and I could say like, and not to compare them, but like the rhinos or something, I definitely want to put in a display. Like those are like them, the barons, like those are animals that for sure deserve it. If you're gonna put anything in an enclosure,
Yep,
just these bright, beautiful animals that are super active and stuff.
Yep, I agree. Have you noticed? So the kid I was talking about, his name is Grayson Casey, West Coast Colubrids. You guys should check him out. He's a really good.
I follow him. Yeah, okay, we follow each other.
Yeah, so he's the kid I was talking about mentoring, and it's kind of funny because I think he got his pretty much all of his breeding stock from Rod, and he was my mentor. And then he started talking to me, and I'm like, dude, I'll mentor you. So it's kind of funny how it's all trickled down that way.
Nice.
But he was asking me about skin issues with rhino rats, and I was kind of perplexed. I was like, I'm not sure what he's really talking about. And then I pulled mine out of brumation today. I was like, oh yeah, these fuckers are always in their water, and then they always have blisters and stuff like that. So do yours soak a lot?
Mine do. I have not noticed any skin issues. The thing I'll find is that they'll spend a good while, and sometimes it will be near shed, sometimes it won't be near a shed, but they'll spend like days on end in the water bowl, but then they'll spend days on end bone dry.
Yeah.
Like, on their perch, in their hide, doing whatever. So they kind of just rotate. I don't think they're getting enough like wet exposure. I also don't keep them like they're currently in tubs. I don't keep them wet by any means. So they're not like humid 24/7 unless they just sit in their water bowl all day. And I don't know if it's just when I open my tub that they happen to be in there, like I don't know if they're cruising back and forth. Like I try not to disturb my snakes a whole lot if I'm not cleaning and stuff and feeding and whatnot. So I really don't know what they're doing throughout the day. But many times when they're in their water bowl, it'll be multiple days in a row where I'll catch them in there.
Yep, I agree. That's what I see with mine. I do know I keep mine on coconut husk.
Yep, me too.
I used to keep them on sandy chips, but I do think that they've and I try my best to keep it a little bit humid. I try to spray down the coconut, and I do think they've done a little bit better. Just not wanting to always be in the water bowl. But what I did, because I have had a couple that just would not stop. It was just constant, and it was also annoying because I'd like top their water off and they'd go kaboom and spill it everywhere, and this just got annoying. So I started doing like 2 like 4-ounce cups like in a little cup holder, so like they can drink, but like good luck getting your body in there. Like it's not gonna happen. And sometimes I'll do like a 4-inch PVC cup holder with like 1 with 2, and then they're just SOL. they can't soak, and then everything's fine. But I've had them just do it incessantly to a point where I'm like, I got to take your water out or do something. So that's what I started doing. And so I always have to remember when I'm like doing maintenance and stuff that the rhinos, specific ones, will need to be watered like twice as frequently because their water bowls are half the size. But it's way worth it because when they get water blisters and stuff, it's no fun.
I've been diligent with checking mine because every time I see them in there, I'll just scoop them out and I'm like, are you good? And like they've been good, but I won't hold my breath if something were to happen to me. But
it's really interesting. Obviously when they're juveniles, they spend like all their time around rocky pools and in water and stuff. So it's just kind of strange, especially where they're from, where they get such high annual rainfall. And when they're up in the canopy, I'm sure they're getting soaking ass wet. Like it's just surprising that they even have water blisters, or even it's possible for them to get them, because you'd think they'd be impervious to that. Like any snake from like a Rupert's reptile video, those snakes are always wet, like wet to the touch, pretty much. Like all the Boiga and everything he finds. It's just weird that they're not more impervious to that. I guess it's kind of strange.
Well, I think good airflow helps too. Because when they do come out of the water, if there is good airflow, like they could dry out. And like I mentioned, not keeping the entire enclosure like sopping wet. I think that's a good thing to do, because then they can actually dry off. And their skin, I don't want to say it feels weird. It's almost like a different material than some other snakes. Their scales. So I don't know. I feel like they dry off a lot easier than some other snakes do.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, they're definitely like the scalation is different. Like it's almost like one layer, like it's not like a scale on a scale like with a lot of snakes, especially with like keeled ones. There's a lot of like interstitial skin and stuff like that. But rhino rats are so sleek. Like there's just it's like one layer of skin. I don't know how else to describe it. It's not like you could like pull up a scale and look under it type of thing. They're very so I don't know if that has anything to do with it. Like if maybe when they're soaking for a long time, it like soaks the interstitial skin under there, and then it's not breathable. But I agree, ventilation is super important, and with any species, honestly. I think that's often overlooked. And it's kind of funny because you see the way people keep stuff. And I've always laughed about the difference of people who like melt their holes with like a soldering iron and people who like drill their holes. Because you see some people who have like these crazy like tridents, and they like get it all hot and they like make all their hole, and they'll make like 50 million of them, and you're like, that's nice. I drill mine, so it would take me ages to do that. But I'm always like, that's actually smart that you like have this thing where you can do like 18 holes at once. But it's always made me laugh because there's 2 different kind of reptile keepers, one that drills holes and one that melts them. I don't like to breathe plastic is my thing. So like
I recently got the soldering iron, and it does make it a lot easier. I'll tell you that. Just because I just, you let it heat up, and it's just beep, and then you just keep going. And I just have the one prong, but so I'm making single holes, but it does its job.
Yeah. After a while, though, you start thinking like, how much plastic have I breathed in today? This is probably right
Whenever
up
I
there.
I do it with the garage open, and I let the fumes
There you go.
blow out. Yeah,
Good call.
for
Good
sure.
call. I don't think everybody does that.
It doesn't. You could smell it too. You smell the plastic burning. It's
Yeah,
very
for
apparent.
Yeah, for sure. But anyway, yeah, I think there's not like a stock expectation for ventilation. Like for everything else, there is temperature, humidity, light, whatever. Nobody really talks about ventilation. I mean,
Right.
obviously, you buy a Freedom Breeder rack, you can get 25% to 100% ventilation or whatever. But yeah, it's kind of interesting when you buy like a hatchling tub from Freedom Breeder, they have like the perforated
Yep.
sides.
Yep.
But then you buy like an FB 8 or 10 and they don't have any. And you're like, why is it important for an FB5 but not for an FB10
Yeah.
or for an FB70 for that matter? So it's just kind of interesting. There's no real like standard basically, which is I mean, obviously we're keeping different stuff in different species, and so you want it to be customizable. But I can't think of anything that does better with stale air.
Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure.
So yeah,
Cool.
but
And before we get into some ball python talk, which I'm sure everyone's gonna love listening to, but I want to highlight some of your hognose, man, because
yeah,
I always say that the hogs are just what's the wording I want to use? I mean, they've just taken over the hobby over these last few years, especially in the colubrid world. With all the morphs, just how small they are, all that good stuff, and
mm-hmm.
you produce a good amount of hogs over there. So if you want to kind of talk about your hognose projects,
Yeah, for sure.
what you got going on with that.
Yeah. I'll be the first to admit that I should produce more hognose. I actually have a couple of double het sunbursts, which are sable and albino, females that are ready to go, and I don't have a male. And I'm like, dude, what am I doing? Like, so there's a few things I need to patch up and fill in, because
Okay.
yeah, for whatever reason, I'm always focused on the kings or the ball pythons or whatever. It's just easy for one species to kind of fall by the wayside here and there. And that's because hognose have been weird for me. Like I did super awesome with them for the first 5 years I was producing snakes. Like they always laid good eggs. I didn't really have any problems. And then I had like 3 years where I maybe made like, I don't know, 5 or 10 or I don't know, who knows, 15 hatchlings, something like that. But I mean, I should have been making 100 because I was like, I had 12 females or something like that, and I had males for all of them, was breeding all of them. So that's really where that kind of came from, was I hit that wall where I just wasn't producing anything, and then they became a lower priority because I'm like, well, if they're not going to do anything for me anyway, I'm not going to buy an $1,800 whatever it is, So now that I've kind of gotten past that and they seem to be doing well for me again, and I don't even have any clue why that was. Nothing's changed. I don't think I'll ever know, to be honest. Just one of those things. But now that I'm producing them consistently again, the snow project is really fun. I've produced albinos from the very beginning, and it's been amazing to see how the demand for albino just seems to always be super high, and the price point doesn't really seem to drop. Like I think I paid $300 a piece for my albinos back in 2016, 2015, and they're like, $100 less or something like that, or maybe not, depending on the time of year, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see that versus some other animals where the value just drops and drops and drops, and then you're like, what am I going to do with this thing that doesn't pay its rent? So that's one of the more recent ones that I've been doing is the the snow super condas, or the super yetis, people call them. Those are, the snow hognose are in high demand. and they're just really cool. I mean, it never gets old looking at a snow superconda. It's almost like a
Yeah.
leucistic without the issues of all the leucistic stuff that comes along with it.
Yeah.
But sable has always been the thing that I like strive for the most. So Dan Eby from Great Falls, Montana, he's my neighbor to the north. Cole Grover and he and I all became good friends, and so I had an opportunity to get into sable when it was pretty new, and I think I traded him like 40 Leonis for maybe it was a pair. Yeah, it was a sable post het axanthic male and an axanthic het sable female, and so that was probably 2017. And so since then, I've been trying to make storm clouds, which are the axanthic sable.
Yeah.
I made one, but it was dead in the egg, unfortunately. And I don't know how I've missed it, dude, because now I have a sable 100% het male, and so I should be making what 1 in 4, I think, right? Yeah, and somehow I just keep getting axanthics and sables that are het for the other. But yeah, this year hopefully I'll hit one. But I, in my opinion, that's one of like the really pinnacle animals. I haven't really done a lot with Arctic, but and I was actually so I met Jeff Galewood from JMG at the Salt Lake Expo.
Nice.
It was just kind of random. I was like, holy shit! Like Jeff Galewood is vending behind us. Like, what? This is very strange. Like, I know he's from Ohio, so I sparked up a conversation. You know, he knows Dan Eby really well, so we hit it off, and he spent my birthday with me, and we had a good long conversation about Arctic. And because I was just telling him, I think Arctic just kind of takes away from stuff. Like, it's kind of like this lightning thing. Like, I'm not sure you're adding much with it. Not knowing that he was like the person who, like,
Yeah.
yeah, I didn't know
Made
that Arctic
Arctic.
was like his thing. They had no idea, and he made a pretty good argument for it. But then ever
Yeah.
since then, I've seen the argument for it in the animals that he's produced with like super Arctic, you know, storm clouds or super Arctic Swiss or like. So I was dead wrong. It adds a lot. So this year I did a pairing to try to make. I'm trying to think what the best thing I could have made was, but it doesn't matter. I made an Arctic Honda het sable post het axanthic,
Okay.
which is really cool. I mean, it's very like a dollar bill greeny type color. Just really different from all the other stuff that I make. So I was really hyped on that. I posted it for sale. It's a male, unfortunately. Otherwise, I'd have kept it if it was a female. I made a really cool axanthic. Yeah, it was just an axanthic conda. I thought it was a super conda though because it was so reduced. And then I was on a podcast with him and I was showing it to him. I was like, check out this crazy super conda. He's like, that's a conda, buddy. And I was like, oh, well, it's a cool conda, right? Like sick. And he's like, no, it is really sick, but it's just not a super conda. I was like, okay, cool. Good to know. So I don't profess to be like the top mind in hognose, but I do know the top in hognose, and so I can rely on their expertise, fortunately. So yeah, I think Swiss chocolate's really cool. I'm kind of waiting for that to come down in price. Jeff and I talked a lot about how Swiss is a little different from Sable. And because, you know, when I first saw it and heard about it, I was like, I'm not sure what, you know, really difference there's going to be between the combos. But now that they've made some, there's definitely merit that it's much different and it's going to add another layer of, I guess, intricacy to the combinations. You know, I like everything with Sable, honestly. I like the Mai Tais, you know, I'm a big fan of Toffee Belly. I used to have quite a bit of it, and I think it was just during the time that I wasn't producing anything for Hognose, and so I moved a few things. There was one really cool gene actually out of, I don't actually know where it came from, but so Neil Richards, the guy in the UK who was doing pyros before Kyle from Prestige Corns, or I shouldn't say before, around the same time maybe. He sent a huge collection of pyros to me because there's just not a market in the UK like there is here. So it made more sense for me to just take them all and sell them here. You know, you got to think that's like selling all of them in your state. You know, it's just very, very difficult to do. So in that same shipment, he sent me a bunch of hognose snakes, and a bunch of them were het for Diablo, which is, I guess, makes them all black eyes. And I think there was a Diablo in it. It was what was it? A Conda. I think it was Arctic Conda Diablo. It was so cool, but I couldn't keep it because I told him I was going to sell them all for him. But man, I would like to see that gene come back because, I mean, yeah, the eyes were just totally black, like demonic looking and really badass. So I think like a lavender sable, like a purple people eater or something with black eyes, dude, that would look so sick. So if anybody knows what happened to that gene, I would love to know, because that's it. You know, it's pretty simple. Like obviously it's a subtle change to change the color of the eyes, but still, as we're seeing, you know, JMG just going to the moon with these combinations, it's like, okay, now add another layer, and I think that would be a really cool one to do. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what else. Really, yeah, I guess I can make sunbursts if I get the right male. Otherwise, storm clouds. That was another thing. I thought that a snowburst was going to be kind of, and this is kind of always my thing. Like I don't think that anything with albino that's going to make it. Or what am I saying? I think when you take away color, regardless of whether it's the saddle or the base color or whatever, I'm always kind of like on the other side, being like, I'd rather go the other way and make it more colorful, right? So like a storm cloud as an axanthic sable, I didn't think adding albino was going to be that helpful. I was like, it's probably just going to take away from it. But I stand corrected. I mean, the snowburst is pretty damn cool. Yeah, and that's kind of the thing I'm learning, obviously, with like the pyro thing. There were projects I didn't think were worth pursuing, and then once I saw them, I was like, okay, that's actually cooler than I would have thought. So that's kind of the fun of it, you know. You dream it up, you think what you imagine what you feel it's going to look like, and then sometimes it falls flat, and sometimes it's beyond your wildest dreams, and so that's kind of the fun of the whole morph thing. And that's why I do it with the Mexicana and Montane Kings where possible. You know, we didn't talk about gray bands, but you know, you have hypos and aneries and gray bands. You have leucistics. It makes it fun, you know, like versus, you know, I've been to people's collections that are all locality specific stuff, and it's cool. I mean, don't get me wrong, but I think it's more interesting when there's both, and you can add a little bit of, you know, obviously not everything's going to be locality specific if you're dealing with morphs. But like in gray bands, you have black gap, hypos, and aneries. So you can do both. It can be locality specific and it can be a morph deal. So that's pretty cool.
All right. Awesome. I almost totally forgot, and I almost brushed over porfs because you got Porphyracia over there, which are some of my favorites.
Oh, are they?
Yeah, I got some Coxai. I have a pair of Volanti as well.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, but yeah, what do you got working over there with the porfs? I know you've been you've hit some Volanti over the last couple of years. I know that for sure.
Yeah.
I've seen them on Morph Market quite a bit.
Mm-hmm. Those are, well, Laticinctus are my favorite, actually.
Okay.
After that would be the Chinese, or Valentire, however the hell you say it. I say Valentine because that's what Brian Barczyk said, but
okay.
Yeah, the V1 from China, those are really, really cool. I've just always liked the brighter colors of Laticinctus because you get kind of the yellow in, you know. Trying to think. So I've made some crosses because I had a trio of Laticinctus originally, and my male unfortunately got loose from his tub, and I found him under my stairs alive, but they're very sensitive to dehydration, as you probably know. And so even though he seemed to be okay, like, you know, a little worse for wear, I put him back in, you know, he drank a bunch of water and passed away. And I couldn't find a male.
Damn.
You know, I found like a baby male, but I had these two adult females that were ready to go. And so that's why I made some of those crosses, was because they don't have a long lifespan anyway. And so I didn't want to waste, you know, 3 to 5 years or however long it was going to take me to find a male, because I'm not, like I said, I'm not a hybrid guy at all. And even like making locality crosses, I'm not real wild about. But looking at like their home range and looking at iNaturalist and stuff, there's quite a bit of intergradation that happens anyway. And I felt like as long as you are telling people what they are, and as long as they're smart about what they do with it, and they don't just breed it back to a Laticinctus and call it Laticinctus, then it should be fine. So the Laticinctus coxeye crosses were pretty interesting because they were like right in between. They were exactly what you would expect, strongly striped but strongly banded. And it was cool because you'd have like a stripe, it would stop, you'd have nothing, and then the band, and then it would stop, and then the line. So they're cool looking. So now, I obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, I have a male Laticinctus now. So I've been producing pure Laticinctus for the last probably 2 years. Let's see, what else did I do with the coxeye? I never have produced a pure coxeye. I don't know what the deal was with the female I had. She would lay eggs, but none of them would be good, and they weren't even like slugs. They were all like deflated and weird, and she's just not a good breeder. But the coxeye were always by far the meanest ones that I had. Like the Valenti are super chill experience. And the Laticinctus it depends on how you approach them. You can definitely evoke an angry response if you catch them sideways, but normally they're very handleable. And the pulchra,
I picked up a coxeye. I picked up one of my adult female coxeye, and she fully food wrapped my hand, was squeezing my hand as tight as she could, and was just kept biting me. And I was just like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah,
like, chill.
Exactly. Yep. And so I don't keep coxeye anymore. I sold mine because I got so tired of them. I always keep mine on the bottom level of my racks because they like it cooler, which is, and it makes sense because with back heat, it's a little too cool for my kings anyway. And so it's a perfect kind of species to just go, that's exactly where you need to be anyway. So that way I'm not wasting that bottom tub on just having nothing in there. But yeah, they would just come flying out and they'd wrap around my shoe. And so I just got tired of them after a while. And I was like, they're not my favorite of them anyway. So that's why I did want to say, I wanted to be able to say that I produced all 4 subspecies, but I can't say that. I've made the pulchra though. I have an adult female. Actually, speaking of things that I need to get a male, because she's just slowly kind of crept up and suddenly she's an adult, and she's really cool. She's very aberrant. Like she's not banded like most of them are. She's got like little, almost like a very reduced, like a jag, like just a little bit of a band on the side, like splotching. So she's really cool. And those, in my experience, have been really chill too. I had a trio from Europe, and I produced those for a very long time, and they were always chill. But this one female I have is not chill anymore. She was when she was a hatchling, but now she's straight coxeye mode. I don't know what her deal is. I don't know what her deal is, but I'll tell you a funny story. I sold a Laticinctus cross, I think some sort of bamboo rat snake, to a lady. And I asked her, quite a few questions, and I got the sense that she was very well aware of what she was getting into. And I just didn't ever say anything about like, oh, these snakes are total assholes. I never like spelled it out like that. But I got the sense she knew, like had done her research, but no, evidently not. So she got the snake, and then she messaged me and she's like, this snake is like rattling its tail a lot and like striky. Like, have you experienced
called a snake?
Yeah. She's like, have you had this problem? I was like, yeah. Like, I like to call bamboo rats ornamental. Like, they're not a pet. They're cool to look at. They're not that cool to like hold and like take to your freaking kid's kindergarten class or whatever. Like, they're not that type of snake.
I think as an observation pet, though, if I could jump in there, I think they make a great pet reptile, fantastic, even like for a new keeper. Like they're so good. True. And so easy to take care of.
Yeah, as long as they don't want to boop the snoot and actually pet it.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is something you observe more than you interact. And I mean, it depends. Like, I've got certain ones that you could totally take out and nothing's gonna happen. But there are other ones, dude. I had these crosses, the adult crosses that I raised up of the Coxeye and I think Valentine. They were the meanest snakes I think I've ever even seen. They were, yeah, I was worried for their safety because like walking by, they would just like boom, boom, boom up against the plastic and just so crazy. Like, and they would whip their tails really hard. And that always concerns me. Like when snakes whip their tail hard against something, like they can like bruise themselves and like really cause damage. So yeah. So it definitely depends on the individual, but I had to laugh because I was like, wow, you talked a good game, lady, but you clearly didn't know what you were getting into. So I felt a little bad. And so from now on, or from then on, I've always been very clear with people like bamboo rats are not a corn snake. Just to be clear. And they have sharp little teeth, dude. Have you been got by them?
Yeah. I'd say theirs aren't that bad. If I'm gonna take any bite, I'd take a porf over pretty much everything else I have here.
Yeah. It's just surprising how like they don't like make you bleed really, but they just somehow get deep and like they just hurt a little bit. You're like, dang, that kind of they somehow get past that layer of dermis where you're like, shit, you little bastard. That's I feel that, versus like a king snake or something. You're like, it's more pressure than anything. Oh, but that's something I do want to mention. Every time I mention Mexicana and Montane king snakes, one of the biggest reasons that I gravitate towards them and keep them over Cal Kings or Jatula or Gatula or whatever you want to call them, the common king snakes, is because of their demeanor and because they don't turn their head and just chew on you needlessly like a Mexican black king snake or like a Florida king, or Cal King. There are a lot of king snakes, and this is just something I've been trying. It's a stereotype that I'm trying to kind of break down because I have people come to me at shows and they're like, we want a snake, but we do not want a king snake. We know that for sure. No matter what it is, it cannot be a king snake. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, because they've seen, Uncle Joe has a Cal King and it just bites everybody's thumb off. But, so I'm trying to get people to understand like the difference because I've kept both, it's not like I have my lifer Cal King that I caught. I still have her and she'll poop all over me and rub her cloaca anywhere she can, which is really annoying. I had Mexican Black Kings for a very long time. And then I just got to a point with them where I was like, dude, you're doing too much. Like, especially the babies rattling their tails. You can't even put them on a white deli cup insert because they wipe their cloaca and they bleed out of their cloaca. And it freaks people out at shows. They're like, your snake is dying. And I'm like, no, it's just a weird defense mechanism that they think they need to do when I put them in a cup. Yeah. So, yeah, they just got to a point where I was like, man, this is, I can keep melanistic Nuevo Leon king snakes. They're more beautiful, in my opinion. They're more iridescent, and they don't try to fling poop on you. You can hold them for as long as you want, and they're never going to just turn their head and be like, oh, I wonder if I can fit that in my mouth. And yeah, I hate watching that, man, especially with somebody who doesn't know what's coming. If they're holding like a Florida King or something like that at a pet store or whatever, and you just see it start to nuzzle its head down into their hand, you're like,
oh yeah,
here it comes. So that's what I love about the Mexicana and Montane Kings is that they just, you could cop a bite pulling open their tub or whatever, like a mistaken feeding thing or something like that. That's totally possible. But outside of that, never going to happen. And the Durango Kings are the most docile in my experience. They are absolutely puppy dog tame. Like just kind of like how, have you ever interacted with a Trans-Pecos rat snake?
Yes, but it's been a very long time.
Yeah. Those are one that I think are very underrated just for their chillness. Like, they don't see us as a threat, and that's very important when you're looking for like a pet for somebody, So yeah, they are good that way. But that said, I also like little piss and vinegar here and there too. So I'm looking at some. I was listening to your episode about what was it? Tiger rat snakes with Stephen Kush.
Last week with Steven. Yeah.
I was like, damn, I need to look more into those. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those?
Not tigers. No, I have what
You
I'd
have
say are close.
right?
What was that?
You have Poacelonotus, right?
Yeah, Pacillinotus. Yeah, I was gonna say those are, I guess, the closest relative to the Spilotes
Oh, for sure.
complex.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Pacillinotus, they're super cool. Honestly, that whole like puffing snake complexes are very, very interesting.
Yeah. They're really. I
I
haven't even
think
seen one in person. That's how cool they are.
I mean I don't blame you. They're just like kind of they're rarer, and there are more and more people breeding them. So I think we'll start to see a lot more of those animals come into the general trade over time.
Yeah.
For sure.
Were yours feeding when you got yours, or did you have to get them going?
Yes. Yeah, no, he John keeps them for a year before he sells them, actually. So he
Okay.
sells them as established yearlings.
From Palm Beach
And that's
Colubrids? Is that the
yeah,
John you're talking
yeah.
about? Nice.
Yeah, and they're still in their ugly duckling phase at that
Right.
point. So like you really have no idea where you're gonna get. Even the last shed on this female is when she's actually started to change color. So like, and I think the male's right behind her. So super
Cool.
fun. And they're almost, they're almost going on 2 years now. So yeah.
That's awesome. I had an opportunity to buy a clutch for like wholesale, and I was like, nah, I don't think I want to do that for my first go around. Like, I'm experienced with snakes, but not with puffing snakes and
Yeah, and you
neotropical
gotta
anything.
yeah, and sometimes with newborns or fresh neos, you got to do the whole pinky trick where you're literally basically holding them and beating them with a pinky in the other hand.
Yeah.
So it's an interesting process, but I actually learned how to do that. So now I know for future reference, but it's
Good.
actually it's not that hard, but yeah, it's definitely if you have no idea what you're doing, it could be a little daunting, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure.
And they bite. They're called bird eaters for a reason. Like they are made for arboreal hunting, and their
Yeah.
teeth. I mean, granted, they're still small, but those, you feel that whole bite
Yeah, I
when they
bet.
get you.
Mm-hmm. Yep. There's something to be said for arboreal snakes, and their teeth are
Yep.
no joke. Doesn't
Yeah.
matter what it is. If it's in the trees, watch out.
Oh yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. Before we get to wrap up tonight, I wouldn't do your your business justice if we didn't talk about the best ball python project out there, which is
Hypopuzzle all day.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, hypopuzzle, man. You made a badass black pastel hypopuzzle. I'm in the project as well. For those who don't know, I think hypopuzzle is so cool. It's like the next hot thing. It's not even the next hot thing. I mean, it's just there, and people
Yeah.
are going hard with it.
Mhm.
I, I've even said like I slimmed down my entire ball python collection just to solely revolve around hypopuzzle. Like that's how much. And honestly, I'm happy with that because I don't want a lot of ball pythons. I want a lot of colubrids, but like I really like that project. I like how they look. I made myself a hypopuzzle this year, so that was super exciting. But yeah, talk a little bit about your ball python stuff, man, because totally different side of the industry too.
Yeah, that's true. So yeah, I've always gravitated more toward colubrids from the very beginning. But it wasn't long before I got my first ball pythons. That was probably 2013. And that was, I mean, geez, that's so crazy. That was only 12 years ago, but that was a time where a pastel lesser and a pastel female were like both decent, like snakes to have. It wasn't like today where you're like, what are you doing? Like, you got to, like, if you bought those today, people would laugh at you. So it's amazing. And that's kind of frustrating how fast it moves. So that's one thing that I like about the colubrid like side of the hobby and the business is that there's no real rush.
Yep.
Aside from like blue barons racers, that seems to be the only thing where people are like, give me 5.7 because I got to make as many of those as I can, as quick as I can. Other than that, I don't really see anybody, I guess in Hognose there's a little bit of that, but other than that, everybody's just kind of plodding along, doing their thing, like especially stuff that's not morphs, it's locality specific, stuff like that. There is no reason to rush. So which I like that a lot. Like the whole anxiety and the frenetic pace of shed testing and, trying to, take a male to 15 females and all this stuff is a little silly for something that's supposed to be a hobby and it's something that's supposed to be fun.
That's the other thing too, man. And sorry to interrupt you, but like that's part of why I had to slim down too. Cause I'm like, I have all these other projects, but like, why am I doing this just to be in this rat race? I'm like,
Right.
I don't want to do that. I want to enjoy the ball pythons I'm working with. So if I'm gonna do that, I might as well have the one project I really, really like and see potential from. So that's why I just made that kind of conversion with my collection.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's the hardest thing with ball pythons because there's so much. And I'm guilty of it. I mean, I'm in way more projects than I need to be. I will fully admit that. And like you say, it's even if you're not the first one to make this hypo puzzle combo, you still that's kind of your thing. So it's like, well, okay, maybe someone made it first, but I might make it second or third or something, versus like hypo clown pied or something like that, where maybe by the time you make that triple, there's already a triple codom hypo clown pied, and it's like nobody even cares you made one. And it's got pied, so maybe it's got 2 inches of pattern, and so good job making a hypo clown that's basically white. So there's a lot of that going on too. But yeah, puzzle, I got into puzzle with do you know who Dominic Catalfamo is from Unbelievables?
I don't actually.
Okay, so I got my stuff from him originally, and then I kind of trying to remember what I paired. Oh yeah, that's right. So the female that I made the hypo puzzle with, I just bred her to a pastel het puzzle because this was like 2018 or 19. Is that right? No, it was later than that. Sorry, no, it was like 2022. I'm tripping. But it was still early on where like just making a puzzle was kind of like cool. Like people have made them for years, but like nobody was really focusing super heavily at that point. And I was just starting to realize like, dude, puzzle's way cooler than clown. Like I'll say that. I love clown. Clown is freaking sweet. Puzzle is way cooler. Like it's way more intricate. It's way more variable. Like it's just something about it is so much more pleasing to my eye. And so yeah, I bred her, made my first puzzle, and luckily I kept 2 females out of that because now I know that they're poshet puzzle or poshet hypo. Nice. Sorry. And I have only been able to test one, and she did prove het hypo, which I'm stoked. The other I'm just waiting for a shed on. But yeah, that was the weirdest thing. I bought a black pastel hypo het puzzle from what's his name? Always Evolving Pythons. Miguel Garcia.
Miguel. Yeah.
Totally drew a blank there. And I got that snake, dude, and it just, yeah, there you go. Nice. And so I had plans for that snake to go to pretty much all my hypo stuff that year, but he just would not eat. And so luckily, the female het puzzle, or now I know double het hypo puzzle, was the number one priority. So luckily he got the job done with her. And I actually thought it was a dual sire clutch at first because I made a black pastel puzzle, het hypo, but the other male I had used had het red axanthic in it. And so I had to message Corey Woods and be like, dude, is this a het red axanthic puzzle? I don't really know like what I'm looking at. And he's like, no, I think that's a black pastel puzzle. And so now I know I shed tested everything and I know everything was sired by him.
Nice.
And so yeah, I'm stoked that I have that male too. I think a black pastel puzzle het hypo is a great male to have.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, I just want to make more of that. Like honestly, like add a little OD or whatever you want to do. But bro, that's all I need right there. That is like the perfect ball python in my opinion. It's right up there with like completed visions. Like don't do anything to it.
Did you make this Axanthic puzzle or did you buy
I didn't. Yeah, I bought it.
it? Okay.
Yep.
Still
So
cool.
you know,
That's a nice
yeah,
animal.
yeah. So the next step is True Ghost puzzle,
Nice. Yeah.
and
That
I don't
that
hear a lot
that's
of
gonna
people
look
talking about True Ghost
amazing.
puzzle. Yeah, it's gonna be freaking sick. It's
That's
hopefully
gonna look
if you
amazing.
can get like a really good, like very bluish one, and I think having black pastel in it might help that, dude. If you could get a black pastel True Ghost puzzle, I think it would look so
Oh
freaking
yeah.
awesome. Well, that's that male right there. Yeah.
Oh, my
So
bad.
when he first came out, I was like, I'm not sure what I'm looking at, but
Oh,
yeah,
interesting.
I showed that to some other people. They're like, that's just a puzzle, and I was like, well, it tested for black pastel, and Corey Woods told me it's a black pastel, and he's been full time since 2004. So
Yeah, yeah,
I'm not gonna argue with him. He knows
yeah.
what's up.
I just I recently got a black pastel animal for the project, but it's a black pastel OD possible red stripe triple het DG hypo puzzle. So
Yeah.
yeah, that was a nice female I needed to add. I was like, okay, that sets me up nice. No matter
Wow.
what way I want to take that. So
That's
um
that's awesome.
but
Yeah, like I said,
yeah.
OD would be like the next logical thing to do to like the black pastel hypo puzzle. And shit, I don't even know what red stripe would do. What do you think the chances are that that actually has red stripe?
So it came from Canova and they were like, we're saying it's POS because of the color. I don't think there's very strong indicators that it is. If it pops up, I'll probably know.
Yeah.
I think it has to separate from the black pastel. I think it's very hard. If it is red stripe, it's hard to see because of the black pastel.
Yeah.
And probably some het influence going on. I don't know. There's some pattern in the dorsals that are like maybe because it kind of has a bit of a linear pattern going down, and I'm just like, I don't know though. But
That's
either
insane.
way, and then yeah, I have an OD double het female growing up too. That'll probably be ready to breed next year. And some other cool stuff. So I mean, I'm just excited for the project. I got a GHI double het male to plug into. I love
Yeah.
GHI, so I want to get
man.
that in there.
Especially in puzzle. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I've always been a big GHI fan anyway, but then when I saw the first iterations of it in puzzle, I was like, no way. This is so awesome. I had a trade opportunity when I sold a black pastel hypo het puzzle female. The guy had what was it? It had pastel in it, but it was a pastel GHI, something else, like 2 other genes, hypo puzzle female, and I was like, damn, that's
Okay.
kind of hard to pass up. I was like, that's if it didn't have pastel, I'd go for it, but I don't like pastel and all that much. I think pastel and puzzles freaking sweet, and especially DG puzzle. I think that's pastel's gonna be awesome. But did you see Vision Quest isn't down in the chat?
Yeah, that's the homie Den. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got the crazy DG puzzle.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. That's who you need to get your game up from. I see.
No, I know.
I
know Dan. I know Dan. He's semi-local to me. I've bought an animal from him before.
Oh,
so
cool. Okay.
Yeah.
And shout out to Ledka too. My buddy just bought a snake off of him. It is a what? It is a chocolate double het. No. Is it? Yeah, double het True Ghost TSK hypo,
Nice.
and I think it's POS het DG. So yeah, that's kind of funny because this guy lives 15 minutes from me, and yeah, just kind of funny because that's a very specific project. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
That's cool. Out come the wolves, man. As soon as the ball python talk, here they come.
Oh yeah.
Awesome.
There's a reason I called this Colubrid corruption because I started and I was in all the ball python circles and all that, and I still am to some extent, but like I really wanted to get people, there's a lot of people that really just like, it's like they're so laser focused on ball pythons, and it's just like I want people to know, like, guys, those aren't the only snakes in the world, man. Like there's some really cool shit out there, and I wish I wish more ball python breeders were open to diversifying their collections and
Yeah.
having some other cool snakes that aren't, just your like common stuff. Too, because a lot of them, if they do get something else, it's something that's common. I just wish people like just expanded their horizons just a
Right.
little bit.
Especially because ball pythons kind of allow you that seasonal cyclical thing where like when they kind of are done, then the colubrids come on. And so
Yep.
it's kind of like a perfect like juxtaposition where you can do both and have a lot of
Yeah,
fun with both. So
definitely.
at least that's how my collection kind of runs. Maybe it's just because I just stop pairing everything when the colubrids come up. I'm like, whatever, it's fine.
Gotcha.
Because you know how it is. The colubrids start to swell, and it's like if that ball python's only had 2 locks, then that's what she's got. Because I gotta be over here with these guys.
Yep.
But another cool double recessive that I don't hear people talk about is DG and Ultramel together. Have you ever seen those two together?
I have. I don't know how I really feel about them.
Really, I think it's so cool.
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I've only seen like maybe 3 examples. Like, there's not a lot of it out there, but that's one I know Ozzy's working hard on, and I got 2 females from him. But yeah, I would love to see a lot more stuff in DG and Ultramel together. I think it's
Gotcha.
what did you see that had both? Do you remember?
I think KG showed some DG Ultramels.
Okay.
I think he hit a couple of those.
Nice.
I don't know. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. I'll be honest, I'm very picky with ball pythons though. Like my taste is like, you can tell someone can say this is the best thing in the world, and I'm just like, about it.
Yeah.
And maybe that's me being a little bit of an ass, but I don't know. I'm very picky when it comes to combos I like and stuff like that. So
fair enough. Yeah. Cool. I say keep it quiet till I'm making them.
yeah.
So great. Yeah.
Nice.
I've got my double het DG Ultramel females, and I've got, unfortunately, he's super pastel. I wish he only had 1 copy, but I have a puzzle, super pastel puzzle het DG I'm going to put to those because I'd like to see an Ultramel Desert Ghost puzzle at some point. And I mean, if you don't hit both, you're still making sick ass puzzle stuff.
Yeah.
Either. So I like the Ultramel puzzle stuff a lot too. I think.
Yeah, it's cool.
Yeah. What's Josh Lumberg?
Josh Jackie.
Yeah, he's making the best Ultramel puzzle stuff right now. It seems like he's making the only Ultramel puzzles that I've seen, like the only double visuals. How much are Blue Barons overseas? About $2,000. They were supposed to be like 2,500, $3,000, and then I guess everybody like got theirs feeding and posted them all at the same time, and so that's where they kind of ended up at. So,
got another question.
Oh man.
In your experience, Joel, just so audio listeners know, in your experience, what is the hardest subspecies of Lamprepeltis to get hatchlings established feeding?
I bet I could give you a different answer for this every single year. Because it's some years it's been Durango Mountain Kings. Some years it's been, honestly, some of the Leonis can be really hard depending on the bloodline. There was one year I took, I think it was 70 snakes. Rod from Highland Herps had a bunch of snakes. Then he was like, dude, I've just got a lot going on in life. Like, can you just take them and get them feeding? And there were some in that group that he sent me that were so freaking difficult. And it was really annoying because they weren't like my own snakes. So I was like, I got to do everything in my power to get them feeding, versus, like you say, with like a Texas rat where you're like, dude, it's just not in the cards for you, I guess, because I've tried everything and don't know what to tell you. But man, yeah, some of those Leonis were really, really difficult. So I've had that experience with them. Gray bands, definitely. I mean, people say it all the time that they're one of the hardest, and there's a good reason for that. I think it comes down to bloodline and locality and that type of stuff more than it does the subspecies, honestly. Trying to think I'm trying to think of them all. So Ruth and I were the last one. So I finally produced everything, all the subspecies, except for Lamprepeltis webi, obviously, because there's only 5 specimens ever known, and only 2 of those were alive. So of course, no one
Gotcha.
gets the opportunity to work with that. But of all the others, yeah, Zanata can be hard. That's California Mountain Kings. Pyros, I would say, are one of the easier ones. So far in my experience, I've only had one clutch of the Ruthvenai, which those are Querétaro Mountain Kings for anybody. Oh, and then I'm forgetting about Mex too. Mex are usually pretty easy, luckily. But I'm trying to think, am I forgetting one? No, I think that's everybody except for Terra Humera Mountain Kings, which I don't work with, or unless you believe the paper that now all my pyros are Terra Humera Mountain Kings. So I either work with them a lot or I don't work with them at all, depending on who you listen to. But yeah, I really think it's bloodlines, and I have really started to kind of go away from the really really hard ones because it's just frustrating. Like there are times where you can produce, a clutch and you maybe get like 3/5 of them going and the other ones perish, and that's a real bummer. So, that's one good reason that I stick with some of the better feeding stuff, and because I had some locality alterna that just didn't seem to be worth my time. I'd get 7 eggs and maybe get 3 of them eating, and so, and maybe some of that'll change with the brumation tactics that we talked about.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm able to get them down sooner and all that type of stuff. I actually took a page out of Jeff Galewood's book. So I've been force feeding pinky heads, but I've been using like forceps to do it. And it's really annoying because sometimes you get the pinky down there and then their teeth like touch the like serrated part and you have to like wiggle them out and stuff. I saw him on Instagram using like a big, huge probe for like a reticulated python, giant probe with a big old ball on it. And he was using it like a ramrod basically to like force feed a pinky head. And I've been using that method since I saw him doing that, and that works really well. It gets it down really smoothly, and it is so much more like sustenance than a mouse tail. Mouse tails are very easy to get down there, but there's nothing to it. I mean, they just poop straight calcium. You know what I mean? That their poop is literally just calcium. So they get whatever's around there, a little bit of hair or whatever, and that's it. And so the 36 that I mentioned that I'm still force feeding or doing interventions with, I'm doing heads, and I'm noticing that their body condition and their body tone is way, way better. So I think that's a big hack that I think a lot of colubrid breeders need to switch over to, is instead of doing this tail thing like every 3 days or whatever you're doing, because I do think it is necessary to do it way more than once a week just because of how quickly they metabolize it. I think pinky heads are good because it gives them a little something. You see a little food bolus. It takes a couple days to digest, versus a tail. Like I've tailed a snake and then got confused about which one I tailed, and I have to like palpate them and like, do you even have a tail in you? I can't tell. Hard to know. So yeah, that's there. I don't know, man. At some point, there's going to be some silver bullet that we'll find out. Like Amazon will put out some weird like spray scent or something, and we're going to be like, oh, now everything eats. I have no faith in Amazon, but I'm just saying, somebody like that. Somebody. One day, maybe. But yeah, that's I don't think I can narrow it down to a subspecies, but yeah, like I have not made all 4 porfs, but I have made all of the Mexicana and Montane Kings, which
nice.
Pretty damn proud of that, because
yeah,
and that's the weird thing. Like I was saying with hognose, like hognose were my Achilles heel for 3 years in a row, and I know keepers way better than me who have a certain king snake or a certain locale of milk or whatever that just for whatever reason won't do anything for them, and you just got to persevere, man. Like, I think that's part of the thing with the colubrid mentality is like, I'm not in a rush. I'm not going to make $1 million anyway. So I'll just, as long as they're doing well, I'll try again next year. you know, versus like the ball python thing where it's like you got to turn them over, your females
Yeah.
obsolete now, you know, and that type of thing, which that's kind of a bummer, you know. It's kind of it's cool to
Yeah.
be able to keep a snake for its whole life, and that's one thing about colubrid people that I value is it seems like maybe their snakes mean a little more to them in certain scenarios because it's rarer, you know, or maybe you collected it yourself and it was a really difficult, you know, journey to find the animal or that type of thing, you know.
Yeah.
I think that's really cool. And are you into field herping at all? I was going to ask you that.
I actually I have not. I really just not at all. Yeah, I grew up in New York before I moved to Florida. And there was really no New York City field herping to do.
Yeah. Right.
I know it's a bad excuse. I just haven't while I'm down here in Florida. But
Gotcha.
I don't know.
You'll have
I know it
to.
sounds very, very anti-keeper of me. I know.
No, that's.
Anti-colubrid lover, but I just haven't.
Have you like happened upon anything like just driving around there? You're like, oh, there's a rat snake, or there's
No.
nothing like that. Okay.
I'm in Boca Raton in Florida,
Yeah.
so I'm not like in some like deep Everglades. Like I'm in a very uh established
Suburban.
like city suburban type place. So I think wherever everything is, it's like you got to get into the wilderness like
Yeah,
legit.
for sure.
And I'm just not there. It's so developed over here.
That's true. I've been to Boca and I've seen a lot of iguanas on like the docks and stuff like
Yes,
that.
there's plenty of iguanas. Don't you worry about that.
Yeah.
And anoles and all that stuff everywhere. So
Yeah.
it's just snakes. No, I'm lacking on Florida snakes.
You had Harry Claiborne on here, didn't you?
Yeah.
And well, he's way up in Tallahassee, but at some point,
Yeah.
maybe he'll have to drag you out because I know he knows what he's doing in Florida.
I've had a few people that said they need to get my ass out, but we'll see.
Cool. Yeah, I think that's another aspect to the colubrid experience, you know, especially
Oh yeah.
like if you went to Texas and you collected a Texas rat that was unique or something, you know, like that type of animal just holds a difference, like
Oh yeah.
place in your collection. Like I said, I kept my my lifer Cow King, and that whole experience, like I couldn't like for some reason the thought of like letting that snake go was like no way, like this is way too special. Like I've lived in California, like I've had many times I should have found California kings, never have. I found my California mountain king snake before I found my first Cow King, which is dumb because mountain kings are way rarer.
Yeah.
But it was on the same day actually that I found my lifer Zonata. We were coming down the hill, well, the big mountain range, and there was a snake in the middle of the road just going crazy on like just striking at all the cars going by, and it was getting straddled by all the cars. So I thought it was like a pissed off rattlesnake in the middle of the road because it was like 4 foot. And like I say, people were just driving over it, like clearly trying not to hit it. And so I pulled the car over, jumped out, and this thing goes slithering across the road and into a culvert that had water in it, and it started to swim under the road. So I had to like jump down in the water and like hold it up like Steve Irwin, dude. It was like the best moment of my life. I was like, I fucking got it. Yeah. It was great. And then all these people like turned around because they had driven by and seen the whole thing. They're like, what the hell happened there? Like, what is that snake? I'm like, it's a California king snake. And they're like, oh, good. Just wanted to make sure it didn't die and we didn't hit it. It was awesome, dude. It was something you'll never forget. I did lose my gun though. At the same time, I had my gun somewhere on me, and when I jumped out of the car, I lost it. So there's a pistol in that county lost somewhere, but other than that, it's a great experience.
Yeah.
Because when you're in the mountains alone, dude, or even with a couple people, I think it's a good idea to have a gun. There's
probably
weird mountain stuff goes on, very remote that you don't want to be caught without one.
Yeah.
But I'm from Idaho, so everybody has a gun here.
Yeah. Everyone has one here too. So
I believe that. Florida.
Yeah.
That's America. It's very American.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. I got a few wrap up questions for you before we finish up tonight.
Okay.
Firstly, when I ask everyone, I mean, look, man, you've been doing this a long time, but really, when it comes down to it, what is it that keeps the fire burning, the passion going for keeping reptiles? Especially, you have a very big collection. I'm sure it takes up a lot of time of your day, all that stuff. Something I commented on Instagram. You have a ton of positive, sales reviews on Morph Market and stuff. So, I mean, but like, what gets you out of bed to do this every day?
Yeah, that's a good question. Hatching season is definitely kind of the thing that fills up your sails with that wind that you need to just kind of keep things going. Especially, ball python hatchling season is fun, but it's not so like rapid fire, like and the colubrids, they come so heavy and so fast, you can barely keep up. And it's fun because you kind of rediscover stuff. You hatch things and you're like, dude, that's insane. Can't wait to see it when it sheds. You see it when it sheds, and it's even better than you thought. And then you set it up and you give it its little ID tag, and it takes a couple meals, and you're like, that's that same snake. It looks totally different now. Like, or I noticed this about it that I didn't see before. Like a paradox spot, or all that kind of stuff. That's just all the stuff that makes the animals unique. I mean, that striped orange jag, that Leonis that you showed, is a really good example of that, where I remember that hatching, but at the time I was kind of like, oh, it's kind of interesting, whatever, just I've got so much going on. I can't like sit there and, diddle every snake and, check out the belly pattern and do all the things, so you just kind of set it up, move on. And then there's like a rediscovery moment later where you're like, holy shit, that is really crazy. Like, I can't believe how wild that actually is now that I have time to really appreciate it. So I like that. And then there's when you post stuff for sale, it's the same thing. You finally get to take it out, get good pictures of it, look at the belly, look at the, or Morph Market's nice because you can look at last year's clutch and you can compare how this phenotype turned out. And that's been a really fun thing as Morph Market has evolved.
Yeah.
As I'm better at record keeping and reference numbers and everything, now I'm able to see what switching a male does to the phenotype of the babies and that type of stuff. So
nice.
That's always fun. I mean, of course, completing like that last species on your list. I almost gave up on Ruthveni. I think I've tried for 6 years to breed those Querétaro Mountain Kings, and I didn't change anything, did nothing different. I got 6 good eggs, all good, viable babies, and they all ate right out of the egg.
Nice.
So it's like, you get to a point where you're like beating your head against the wall and you're like, I don't know if this is going to pan out or whatever. And then suddenly the heavens open up and you're like, okay, I guess I'm a big old Ruthveni breeder now. No problem. It's the weirdest thing. So a lot of it is that I'm really stubborn as a person, just in general. I just don't give up. And when you're rewarded like very heavily for that mentality, it's really, I mean, it's the same word, rewarding. It's very rewarding. When you're kind of never say die attitude pans out and you're like, cool, because I could have given up and nothing ever would have come of it. Of course, new species always keep stuff interesting. I really want to get into musaranas.
Okay.
Like we talked about the neotropical bird eating snakes. I've been talking to Jason Hood about those since 2013.
Yeah.
To the point that
just do it, man. Just do it.
Yeah, I know, right? I mean, they're black-headed pythons. I mean, there's a lot of python species that I find really interesting. Ryan Young is a friend of mine up in northern Idaho.
Nice.
He's kept and bred more python species than anyone on the planet, and that's very inspiring, especially somebody from the same state as me, because you kind of think, well, maybe living where I am, these certain animals won't do as well, right? Like, I think we have a lot of that in the hobby where we're like, it depends on your geographical region and your outside temps. And obviously that's not always true, because he's damn near in Canada and he's produced what, like 35 species of pythons,
Yeah, it's something like that.
stuff like that, man. And then honestly, the customers, as much effort as it takes to do all those sales and to sell that many animals and to do it ethically, it's a lot of work, but it's really cool, getting that good feedback and having people have really good experiences, and just, when you can kind of sense that people are apprehensive about the transaction, or they're just apprehensive about buying an animal online or having it shipped or whatever that it is. And then you can kind of sense that breath of relief when they've received it and everything's good. And they're like, dude, okay, like you're legit. Like, thank you. Like they give you that like eye to eye,
Yeah.
like, thank you, like for you did everything you said you were going to do. And, and that's really rewarding, honestly, too, when you can tell people are maybe not, convinced that everything's going to go the way that you are telling them. And then they're like, holy shit. Yeah, it's actually better than you even said. And you're like, yeah. And the animal even looks better than you said. And it ate the same day, like that, all that stuff. You're like, bro, I love hearing that.
Hell yeah.
So
Cool. And then that said, would you say, like, the short-term future, the next like 3 to 5 years or so, what do you foresee that looking like for Prismatic Reptiles?
that is a great question. I'm going to refine my ball python collection more. And I say I'm in too many projects, but dude, I'm in way less than I was, so I'm doing good. I'm doing better for sure. That's been a struggle where the ball python thing kind of takes over for a little time, and then
Yeah.
I mean the colubrids have never been on the back burner, but there are definitely times where I'm thinking about breeding plans, and I'm thinking about how I'm going to make this certain combo or whatever. So I think definitely reducing the number of that stuff is important, just because I'm where you're at. Like, hypo puzzle is my passion, and I think I could probably sell everything else other than hypo puzzle project stuff tomorrow and be totally happy. I don't think I would be like, oh man, my hypo stranger clown, like, it's an awesome snake, but I just don't think I would ever lament the loss of it like I would like a freaking hypo Baird's rat, for instance. It's not the same. So yeah, like I say, I want to get into some other species, and I have been whittling down certain numbers so that I can make that possible. But hopefully I'm going to be able to open a reptile zoo.
Oh shoot.
I started working on that. My girlfriend and I started a 501c3 in 2021, and we got a building for it, and I had a security system all set up, and we had enclosures that we had brought in, and I purchased a bunch. And it just, with everything with COVID and the economy and building materials and stuff, it just didn't make sense to continue. And then I also realized, I'm like, dude, I'm only able to do this because my girlfriend is not working. Like, she's a teacher, so she was,
Gotcha.
like, working from home type of thing. So she was helping me so much. And then when she had to go back to school, my kids had to go back to school, I was like, what am I doing? I have way too many animals to take this on. Like, I would have to sell 90% of my collection. So that's kind of, right now the economy is also very unstable. I don't know what the future holds. And so I'm not taking any real like fast steps toward that right now. But when I feel a little more confident in what's going to happen economically, then I definitely want to make that happen, because educating people about reptiles is more rewarding than any sale, or not necessarily any animal you can hit. There are sometimes when you hit an animal and it's even better, but it is really fun to get to interact with people and educate them and kind of change their views and stuff. And honestly, the interaction's nice, man. When you work from home by yourself, like, you kind of miss that, like the workplace, or just, the interaction, stuff like that. So that's another thing that I just know that I need is more, human interaction, and having a reptile zoo is a great way to meet people and interact and just have fun with it.
Nice. Awesome. Cool. And then last and final question is, so let's say, and this works perfectly for you. So let's say you're talking to a ball python person, and they're looking at your ads and now they want to get into a colubrid. What is your elevator pitch for why colubrids?
Are we talking about a specific species or
Nothing.
animal? Or
I mean, look, we could. I'd say generally to your collection, but
Okay.
like, why colubrids?
Okay.
Why should someone want to get into colubrids?
Well, just the way that you'd get interested in ball pythons, because there are a million different flavors and colors and patterns. There's the same, and I would argue even maybe more in the colubrid realm. You know, there's a lot of kind of fun challenges that you can kind of set yourself up with colubrids. A little bit different husbandry. There are animals that need very little interaction. There are animals that need a little more kind of advanced care. So there's every level of like colubrid, and the best thing of all is that most of them eat all the time versus ball pythons that are going to frustrate people. And I run into that all the time, where if I can tell someone's just anxious about owning a snake and they are just going to hate not having it eat every week, then I'm going to steer them toward a colubrid, because I feel their pain. You know, they're like, dude, it hasn't eaten since October. Like, what do I do? And I'm like, aside from trying live or an ASF or something, there's not a lot you can do as long as your parameters are right. So that, and I have steered a lot of people away from ball pythons for that, and they've thanked me. They're like, yeah, I couldn't deal with that. I need a snake that's going to eat when I offer it.
Yep.
If you give your dog food and it's laying in the corner and acting weird about it, you're going to be like, what's happening? Some people are just that
dogs
way.
like that, and it makes no sense to me, but
yeah,
that's besides the point.
That's true. So I honestly think that would be my main thing is, the heat doesn't have to be as high. So that, the risk of fire and stuff like that is less, I would argue. And the chance that your snake's going to eat when you offer it food is going to be much higher. And that's a pleasing experience for like a pet owner.
Oh yeah. Definitely. All right. Well, cool, man. It's been a great 2 hours, 47 minutes. For anyone who doesn't follow you on Instagram, I have the link to Joel's Instagram down below. So please make sure you go follow him. It's hold on, double checking. It's at Joel Reep _prismatic. So make sure you guys follow him on Instagram. Is there anywhere else they should be following you?
If they want to follow my dead YouTube channel, they can definitely do that. I swear I'm gonna get it up and going again. But I do have some cool herping videos on there. Mostly it was like kind of vlog style stuff, but I do have a really good series about Arizona mountain king snake morphs. Cool. I think it's the only thing like that on the internet. So and I show like adult examples and everything, and I go into like the double recessives and stuff like that. So that's one of my cool things, that I'm proud of on my YouTube, as well as a couple unboxings of like big investments that are kind of fun to watch. So yeah.
Nice. All right. Cool, man. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you coming on and taking the time out to talk to me tonight.
Thank you.
But yeah, of course. I'm going to throw you in the backstage. I'll run this outro and then I'll be right back.
All right. Sounds good.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, guys. What another great episode here of the Colubrid Corruption podcast. Yeah, really fun discussion. Really diverse collection. I really enjoyed that conversation. I was excited to have him on the show for sure. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed tonight. Make sure you hit that like button if you're still here, if still watching. Again, if it's your first time here, hit that subscribe button, please. Getting closer to that 1100 mark. So yeah, keep it rolling. Thank you to everyone who is watching live tonight and anyone who watches or listens later. I really appreciate you all. Shout out to all the Patreon members. You're all awesome too. But yeah, guys, once again, this was episode number 58 of the Colubrid Corruption podcast with Joel of Prismatic Reptiles. Hope you all have a fantastic night, and we'll catch you on the next one. Peace.